There's a version of Rick Sanchez that most people have settled on. He's the drunk grandfather, the nihilist, the guy who once almost destroyed the world with a neutrino bomb while drunk and described it as getting a fresh start. He's the man who turned an entire Earth's population into Cronenberg monsters, looked around, shrugged, and moved to a different dimension without a word of apology to anyone. He's the one who sold weapons to hitmen, enslaved an entire civilization inside a car battery, kept an alien prisoner in his basement for experiments, and casually committed what the show's own writers have cataloged as crimes ranging from bioterrorism to grand larceny to, at one point, cannibalism in a post-apocalyptic wasteland. If you lean on that version of Rick, you're not wrong. He is all of those things. The show is honest about it in a way that most television isn't honest about its main characters. Rick isn't sanitized. He isn't given a redemption arc that wipes the ledger clean. He doesn't suddenly become a different person because the audience wants him to. The show keeps both versions of Rick in the frame at the same time, the monster and the person who, sometimes quietly, sometimes at enormous personal cost, chooses to protect the people he loves. That tension is what this documentary is about. Not the monster, not the hero, the space between them, where Rick Sanchez actually lives. To understand why Rick's heroic moments land the way they do, you have to understand how carefully the show has built his reputation as someone who doesn't care. From the very first episode, Rick establishes himself as a man who operates outside human emotional norms. He belches through conversations. He dismisses sentiment with a casual wave. He tells Morty, early and often, that the universe is vast and indifferent, and that attaching meaning to things is a kind of weakness. He phrases concern as irritation. He frames love as a biochemical accident. He tells Beth, in one of the show's more uncomfortable moments, that love is just chemicals making you feel things, a survival mechanism dressed up in sentiment. And yet, the same man who says this is the man who, in Season 2's premiere episode, tumbles into a quantum void and without hesitation removes his own dimensional collar and places it around Morty's neck. He accepts what he believes to be his own death, dissolution into timeless nothingness, because saving Morty is worth it. In that moment, he doesn't perform heroism. He doesn't announce it. He says, "Be good, Morty. Be better than me," in a voice that doesn't have an audience. That's the thing about Rick's heroism that makes it worth examining. It almost never has an audience. The question of who Rick Sanchez really is has been the show's central philosophical project since the pilot episode first aired, November 27th, 2013 online, December 2nd, 2013 on television. Created by Justin Roiland and Dan Harmon, Rick and Morty introduced Rick as a loose comedic parody of Doc Brown from Back to the Future, a wild-haired scientist with a fondness for adventure and a general contempt for rules. But very quickly, in the first season itself, the show evolved into something more uncomfortable and more interesting than that origin suggests. Rick is not Doc Brown. Doc Brown is warmly eccentric, lovably chaotic. Rick is genuinely broken in a way that Doc Brown never was. The differences matter because they explain why Rick's occasional moments of warmth or heroism hit differently. Doc Brown's goodness is baked in. It's his default. Rick's goodness is fought for, against his own nature, against the coping mechanisms of a man in genuine psychological pain. The show's writers understood from early on that the most interesting version of this character was not the comedic genius, but the tragedy underneath the jokes. Birdperson articulates it plainly in the Season 1 finale, Ricksy Business, which aired April 14th, 2014. He tells Morty that Rick's catchphrase, wubba-lubba-dub-dub, isn't nonsense. In Birdperson's language, it means, "I am in great pain, please help me." And then he tells Morty that Rick is, in his own way, always saying that. Every appearance of that phrase, every time he said it as a joke, or a party rallying cry, or a meaningless vocal tick, he was asking. That's the foundation. Everything Rick does, the arrogance, the drinking, the nihilism, the refusal to accept help, the need to be the smartest person in every room, these are not personality quirks. They are the coping mechanisms of a man who watched his wife and daughter get murdered by a version of himself from another dimension, spent decades trying to hunt down and kill that alternate Rick, failed again and again, and then, somewhere in that exhausted grief, chose to insert himself into the life of a Beth who wasn't his Beth, in a dimension that wasn't his, with a Morty who wasn't supposed to be his Morty, and chose to stay. That choice knows that quiet, unannounced choice to stay with this family he has no obligation to might be the first heroic act the show ever gives him. We don't know it's heroic until Season 5's Rick Morai Jack reveals the full backstory. But once we know, it reframes everything that came before it. Rick didn't have to be there. He wanted to be. The backstory of Rick's loss, as revealed across Seasons 5, 6, and 7, is worth spending time on because it's the foundation everything else rests on. In the backstory shown in Season 5, Episode 10, Rick Morai Jack, which aired September 5th, 2021, we see that Rick C137, the Rick we follow throughout the series, was once a different person. He was a content family man living in Dimension C137 with his wife Diane and their daughter Beth. He was a scientist, already brilliant, but not yet the weaponized grief machine he would become. An alternate version of himself, the one who would eventually be called Rick Prime, came to him one day with an offer. Join him. Explore the infinite multiverse. Rick C137 refused. He wanted his life, his wife, his daughter, the small, ordinary thing he had. Rick Prime, in petty vengeance for the refusal, dropped a bomb through a portal into Rick's garage. Rick was spared. He was sitting in his car, away from the blast. Diane was not. Beth, the infant Beth of that dimension, was not. They were killed instantly. The next phase of Rick's life was the pursuit. He invented his own portal gun. He spent years, and Rick Morai Jack suggests it was genuinely years, hunting Rick Prime through the multiverse, trying to avenge Diane and Beth. He was, during this period, entirely consumed by it. He joined other Ricks. He eventually helped found the Resistance Movement, which included Birdperson and Squanchy fighting against the Galactic Federation. And somewhere in that history, exhausted, still grieving, no closer to finding Rick Prime, Rick landed in a dimension where Beth was alive. A Beth who had grown up without him, but was alive. A Beth who had a son named Morty. He stayed. He stayed knowing she wasn't his Beth. He stayed knowing Morty wasn't biologically his grandson, or rather, wasn't from the timeline where he was a grandfather. He stayed because the alternative was more decades of empty vengeance, and this was something warm, something real, something worth staying for. This is the emotional truth underneath every moment in the show. Rick is always, at some level, a man who lost everything and decided, without fanfare, without acknowledgement, without anyone asking him to rebuild something from the wreckage. Most viewers, especially casual ones, absorb Rick as an anti-hero in the broadest sense. He does good things sometimes. He does bad things constantly. The bad things are louder, funnier, more frequently referenced by the other characters. Jerry doesn't tend to thank Rick for the times Rick has quietly intervened on his behalf. Beth oscillates between craving Rick's approval and resenting how rarely he offers warmth. Summer, particularly in the earlier seasons, has to earn her way into Rick's regard through demonstrating she's competent rather than simply being his granddaughter. And Morty, the person most consistently protected by Rick, is also the person Rick most consistently uses, diminishes, and places in danger. This is the contradiction. Rick protects Morty and endangers Morty. He loves Beth and neglects Beth. He fights for his family and defines himself as someone who doesn't do that. He says everything is meaningless and then spends months in a garage alone trying to rebuild his best friend from spare parts. The show doesn't resolve the contradiction, it holds it. And what happens inside that contradiction, the specific moments when Rick's protective instinct breaks through his constructed persona, is exactly what this documentary is going to sit with section by section, season by season. There's a structural reason why Rick's heroism gets overlooked that has nothing to do with his character specifically. It's about how the show positions its emotional moments. Rick and Morty is, at its surface, a comedy, a very dark one, but a comedy nonetheless. When the show needs to diffuse a moment of genuine feeling, it almost always does so immediately. Rick gives Morty his collar in the quantum void. And then, seconds later, when he finds the other collar drifting by and realizes he can survive, he immediately starts screaming and cursing at God. Fuck you, God. Not today, bitch. The sincerity gets swallowed by the joke. That's a deliberate structural choice. It's the show saying, yes, that happened, but we're not going to dwell on it. Move on. This habit means Rick's heroic moments often pass without comment. They land, and then the scene immediately pivots to something ridiculous. The result is that viewers often remember the joke and not the moment that preceded it. The sacrifice gets lost in the punchline. This documentary exists this specifically to pull those moments back out of the noise, to look at them carefully, to sit with them. Because when you do, a different picture of Rick Sanchez starts to emerge. Not a good man. The evidence doesn't support that reading, and the show doesn't want that reading. But something more specific than just a villain. A person who, again and again, when it actually matters, shows up. One more thing worth establishing before the specific episodes begin. Rick's protective behavior toward his family almost always operates through indirection. He rarely says, "I love you." He rarely admits fear or vulnerability. What he does instead is act, quietly, often secretly, in ways that remove threats to the people he cares about. He manipulates situations. He intervenes in ways that look like selfishness from the outside, but serve protective purposes. He arranges things so that he can maintain plausible deniability about caring. The post-credit scene at the end of The ABCs of Beth in Season 3, which aired September 24th, 2017, is a small but perfect example of this. Rick leaves a voicemail for Jerry. He tells him, in a voice that contains zero warmth but total practicality, that he took care of a situation involving Jerry's ex-girlfriend, Kira's ex-boyfriend, Trandor, who had left Jerry a threatening message. Rick found out about the threat. He handled it. He called to let Jerry know. Jerry didn't ask for this. Morty didn't ask Rick to handle it. There's no evidence anyone asked Rick to do anything. He just did it, and then called to tell Jerry he was looking out for him, and then presumably hung up and went back to his life without thinking about it again. That is Rick Sanchez's heroism in miniature. Quiet, deniable, real. It's also, when you think about it, somewhat extraordinary. Rick, who spends most of his screen time telling Jerry and anyone who will listen that Jerry is worthless, that Jerry is the failure against which all Rick's contempt is measured, protected Jerry from a threat Jerry didn't even know existed. He didn't have to. He didn't do it for anyone's approval. He just did it and then walked away. That's the pattern. Across 8 seasons and ongoing, Rick shows up for the people he loves in ways those people will never know about, in ways that don't serve his stated persona, in ways that cost him something: attention, time, vulnerability, pride, that he claims not to have to give. The rest of this documentary is the full-size version of that pattern. One more note before we begin properly. This isn't going to argue that Rick is secretly a good person. The evidence doesn't support that, and the show doesn't want that reading. Rick is a person who does genuinely terrible things with genuine regularity, and the show is clear-eyed about that. Thousands of microverse inhabitants are enslaved inside his car battery to power his space cruiser. He caused an entire Earth's population to mutate into Cronenberg monsters and simply left rather than fix it. He has casually killed other versions of himself. He has manipulated the people he loves repeatedly for his own ends. What this documentary is examining is narrower and more honest than the question of whether Rick is good. It's asking, when Rick had a choice, when he could have walked away, let something happen, prioritized himself, what did he actually do? The answer, across 8 seasons and into a 9th, is more complicated than his reputation suggests. Let's start at the beginning, with the person he protects most often, most fiercely, and most expensively. Let's start with Morty. One thing the show does with Rick's intelligence that casual viewers sometimes miss, it frames his intelligence not as a superpower, but as a source of his specific brand of suffering. Most intelligent characters in fiction are portrayed as advantaged by their intelligence. They see further, plan better, arrive at correct solutions ahead of everyone else. Intelligence in most storytelling is simply a tool that makes things easier. For Rick, intelligence makes things harder. He sees the universe too clearly. He understands, at a level he can't unknow, how vast and indifferent the multiverse is. He has visited enough dimensions to know that there are infinite versions of every outcome, which means that any individual outcome is, in a certain framing, meaningless. He knows that the people he loves are, in the larger perspective of all possible people, not cosmically special. He knows that love, reduced to its components, is biochemistry, and he loves them anyway. He knows all of that, and he loves them anyway. He gives Morty his collar anyway. He sits with the dying alien anyway. He rebuilds Birdperson anyway. He calls Jerry's voicemail anyway. The intelligence doesn't stop the love. It just makes the love existentially harder. Every time Rick chooses to care about someone, he's choosing to care despite knowing, at a level most people never have to reckon with, exactly how fragile and temporary that caring will be. be. This is the show's argument about intelligence and heroism. The heroic act, for Rick, isn't saving Morty from a physical threat. The heroic act is continuing to love Morty in full knowledge of what the universe is and what it does to the things people love. The courage of Rick's caring isn't the collar moment. It's every morning in the garage, choosing to still be there, choosing to still care, despite everything. There is a specific quality to Rick's intelligence that separates him from most fictional geniuses, and it bears on the heroism question in a precise way. Most fictional geniuses solve problems. They apply superior intelligence to obstacles, and the obstacles yield. Their genius is a kind of power, reliable, directional, deployable. Rick's genius does solve problems, often spectacularly, but the show is careful to show that his genius cannot solve the problems that matter most to him. It cannot bring back Diane. It cannot restore the original Beth. It cannot give him the small life in Dimension C-137 that Rick Prime destroyed. For all his ability to collapse Federation economies and rebuild friends from inside their own memories, Rick cannot undo the specific damage at the center of his grief. This limitation is important to the heroism argument because it means that Rick's choices, his decisions to stay, to protect, to care, are not coming from a position of omnipotence. He is not protecting the Smiths because he can do it easily. He is protecting them because he wants to. In the face of knowing that the universe can take people regardless of how smart you are. He knew exactly how smart he was when Rick Prime killed Diane. He was the most intelligent person in the multiverse, and it didn't matter. The bomb came through the portal, and his family died, and there was nothing genius could do about it. He stayed in the Smith household anyway, with full knowledge of what the universe can do to families, with full knowledge of his own limitations. He chose the people who could be taken from him at any moment, and he keeps choosing them, because the alternative, protecting yourself from loss by refusing to love, is the thing he tried for decades of revenge seeking and found worse than the grief. This is the most honest reading of Rick's heroism. It is the heroism of someone who knows exactly how much it costs to love people, who has already paid that cost once, and who chooses to pay it again. The show's pilot episode ends with a scene that is easy to read as pure narcissism, and that reveals, on second viewing, something more interesting. Rick and Morty are in the garage. Beth and Jerry are asleep upstairs. Rick is drunk, as he often is, and he delivers his famous monologue, the one about 100 years of Rick and Morty adventures. Forever. Him and Morty. Forever. It's delivered as a kind of dark comedy, a drunk man's grandiose declaration. The comedy is real. The grandiosity is funny. But listen to what Rick is actually saying. He is telling a 14-year-old boy, you and me forever. Not in a threatening way, in a claiming way. He is, in his first real private moment with Morty, telling him, you are mine and I am yours and this is going to go on. That's not the speech of a man for whom Morty is a cloaking device. That's the speech of a man who has just found something he wants to keep, who is, at the end of the pilot episode, already all in. The drinking and the belching and the nihilism are the packaging, the thing inside the package, delivered in a drunken ramble in a garage at midnight, is, I'm not going anywhere, neither are you. The philosophy of Rick's nihilism, as it functions in the show, is worth examining as distinct from Rick's actual behavior. The nihilism is coherent. Rick has constructed a position that is internally consistent. The universe is large and indifferent. Life is short and temporary. Love is biochemistry. Meaning is imposed rather than discovered. Everything ends. Nothing is cosmically significant. The correct response to this is to pursue pleasure and experience without becoming attached to outcomes. This is a real philosophical position. People hold it. It has a long intellectual history. The problem with applying it to Rick is that Rick doesn't actually behave as if he holds it. A true nihilist would not give his collar to Morty. A true nihilist would not rebuild Birdperson from the inside. A true nihilist would not call Jerry's voicemail to say he's looking out for him. Rick performs nihilism while doing the opposite, and the show's argument is that this performance is itself revealing, that what you perform is sometimes the thing you want to believe about yourself, while what you do is the thing you actually believe. Rick wants to believe nothing matters. His actions demonstrate across 8 seasons that several things matter enormously to him. He can't reconcile the performance with the behavior. The show doesn't ask him to. It just keeps putting him in situations where the behavior speaks louder than the philosophy. The nihilism is the ghost. The love is the actual haunting. Section 2. Every time Rick saved Morty. The relationship between Rick and Morty is the load-bearing structure of the entire show. Everything else, the family dynamics, the multiverse mythology, the Citadel of Ricks, the evil Morty arc, the Rick Prime arc, all of it gets its emotional weight from this specific relationship. A drunk grandfather and his 14-year-old grandson stumbling through the universe together. The show's writers have said in various interviews that the tension at the heart of this relationship is that Rick simultaneously needs Morty, loves Morty, uses Morty, and refuses to acknowledge any of those things. The show's internal mythology even has an explanation for the Rick-Morty connection. Ricks use Mortys as companions because the Morty's brainwave pattern, his anxiety, his emotional noise, his very ordinary human messiness, cancels out Rick's genius on tracking equipment. Morty is, functionally, a cloaking device. A genius of Rick's magnitude gives off so much intellectual radiation, for lack of a better term, that he's detectable across dimensions. Morty's proximity neutralizes that, so there's a practical case for keeping Morty around. Rick has used it. He's pointed to it when anyone suggests his attachment to Morty might be emotional. But practical cases don't explain what Rick does in moments of actual crisis. They don't explain giving Morty his collar in a quantum void. They don't explain killing King Jellybean without saying a word. Cloaking devices don't need to be kept safe. They don't need to be protected from predatory kings, or rescued from simulated realities, or guided back from collapsing timelines. What Rick does for Morty goes far beyond what the practical case requires. Let's start with the pilot episode, November 27th, 2013, online, December 2nd, 2013, on Adult Swim. There's a moment in the pilot that tends to get framed as pure comedy, but it has a protective dimension to it. Rick and Morty are trying to get home through an alien portal after the Megaseed heist. They're being pursued by customs agents on an alien world. Rick is drunk. Things are dangerous. Rick instructs Morty to smuggle the seeds in the only way available at the time, internally, rectally. This is humiliating and painful for Morty. The show plays this for laughs, and it is genuinely funny in the dark and absurdist way the show does dark, absurdist things. But embedded in the chaos of the chase, there is a moment where Rick physically throws himself between Morty and the security forces pursuing them. He takes the hits. He creates the distraction. He lets Morty run. It's easy to miss because it's wrapped in slapstick, but in the very first episode of the series, Rick uses his own body as a shield so Morty can escape. The instinct is already there. The willingness to absorb the danger so that Morty doesn't have to. It's there from the beginning. Lawnmower Dog, Season 1, Episode 2, December 9th, 2013, written by Mike McMahon and directed by Jeff Myers. The main plot of this episode involves Rick and Morty entering people's dreams to manipulate them, specifically Mr. Goldenfold, Morty's math teacher, to get Morty better grades. On the surface, this is selfish. Rick needs Morty to have higher grades so the school doesn't flag Morty's absences from their adventures. But underneath the selfishness is something worth noting. Rick went into the dreams of a grown man to alter his behavior in an elaborate and dangerous process specifically so that Morty's academic standing would be secure enough for them to keep having adventures together. Which is to say, Rick wanted Morty around. He valued Morty's continued presence enough to go through a complex, multi-level dream infiltration process to make it possible. The show never lets Rick say this directly, but the effort speaks for itself. Meeseeks and Destroy is Season 1, Episode 5, which aired January 20th, 2014. Written by Ryan Ridley, directed by Brian Newton. This episode is usually remembered for the Mr. Meeseeks plot, the blue existential creatures who pop into existence to fulfill a single task and then disappear, screaming, grateful for the cessation of their brief, terrible consciousness. It's one of the show's more beloved comedic concepts, and it tends to dominate the episode's popular memory. But buried inside this episode is one of the series' most unexpectedly serious sequences, and inside that sequence is one of Rick's clearest early demonstrations of protective behavior. The setup. Morty, frustrated with Rick's constant dangerous adventures, challenges Rick to let him lead one. He wants something simple and fun, a heroic quest from a fairy tale. Rick, with the particular contempt of a man who already knows how this will go, agrees. The adventure Morty chooses involves a fantasy world. Giants, villages, magic, the kind of thing from a children's story. And for a while, it works. They complete the quest. They're celebrated as heroes. Morty is proud of himself. Rick, grudgingly, is almost impressed. And then, in a tavern bathroom, Morty encounters Mr. Jellybean, the king of the village, who proceeds to assault him. The show handles this with unusual directness. It doesn't play it for laughs. Morty fights back and escapes. The scene establishes that he physically resists and gets away, but the episode refuses to let the moment be anything other than what it is. It's traumatic. The show doesn't soften it. When Morty comes out of the bathroom, Rick takes one look at him. He sees the disheveled clothing. He reads the expression on his grandson's face. He has an intelligence that lets him parse what other people are feeling without needing to be told, and he understands immediately what happened. He doesn't say it. He doesn't ask Morty about it. He doesn't make Morty relive it by articulating it. He simply says they're leaving and opens a portal. But as they're stepping through, as they leave the village behind, Rick reaches back through the closing portal and shoots King Jellybean. One shot, clean. No announcement, no dramatic moment, no speech. The king is simply dead. They leave. There's a post-credit scene the episode adds. Two villagers find incriminating photographs in Jellybean's lockbox, evidence that Morty was not his first victim. They burn the photographs to protect his legacy and avoid scandal for the kingdom. The implication is clear. Rick killed a predator, a serial predator, not theatrically, not heroically in the movie poster sense, not in a way that serves any external purpose, but cleanly, with absolute moral clarity, without making it about himself. This is an early version of a pattern that repeats across the show's entire run. Rick doesn't protect Morty loudly. He doesn't congratulate himself. He sees a threat to his grandson, and he eliminates it, and then he moves on. What makes this moment analytically interesting is the timing. The adventure was over. They were already leaving. No one would have known or cared if Rick had simply walked through the portal and said nothing. The only reason to go back and shoot King Jellybean was because Rick knew what had happened and could not leave without doing something about it. That distinction between what was necessary for practical purposes and what Rick did anyway runs through the entire show. Close Rick Counters of the Rick Kind, Season 1, Episode 10, April 7th, 2014. Written by Ryan Ridley, directed by Steven Sandoval. This episode introduces the Council of Ricks and contains what we'll later understand as the first appearance of Evil Morty, though the episode keeps that reveal for its final moments. The plot involves Rick being framed for a series of murders of other Ricks across dimensions, forcing him to go on the run with Morty. There's a moment at the beginning worth noting. When the Council of Ricks descends on the Smith household to arrest Rick, they use temporal stasis on the family. Jerry is frozen, Beth is frozen. Before Rick cooperates with anything, before he negotiates his own situation, he asks the council to release Jerry. He calls Jerry "my daughter's idiot." The contempt is undeniable, but the action is protective. In the first moments of a hostile occupation of his family's house, the thing Rick asks for is Jerry's basic welfare. Not his own release, not Beth's, Jerry's. Later in the episode, after they've escaped the council, evil Rick has captured a warehouse full of Mortys. He's been using their suffering, their distress, their pain as cover for his operations. A room full of Mortys, experimented on, hurt. When Rick C137 discovers this, his reaction isn't strategic calculation. He's genuinely horrified. He looks at the photographs evil Rick had collected of his Morty. His voice breaks. When evil Rick taunts him for his irrational attachment to a Morty, Rick's anger is real, not performed, real. He rescues Morty. He defeats evil Rick. He is motivated in this episode not by self-interest or even abstract justice, but by the specific and personal need to get Morty back. Rick Potion number 9, Season 1, Episode 6, January 27th, 2014. Written by Justin Roiland, directed by Steven Sandoval. This episode is usually cited as one of the show's earliest dark turns. The moment viewers realized Rick and Morty wasn't going to play by conventional rules. rules. The setup is a love potion that goes catastrophically wrong, mutating first flu carriers at Morty's school, then spreading to the whole world. Rick's attempted fix makes things worse. First mantis creatures, then Cronenberg monsters. The world is genuinely gone. Rick's response is to find a dimension where another Rick and Morty had just died in an unrelated garage explosion. A coincidence he monitors for, apparently, and portal there. He and Morty take the places of their dead counterparts, burying those bodies in the backyard. They assume new lives. This is not heroic. Let's be clear. Rick caused this disaster, and his solution was to abandon the Earth he destroyed rather than spend the time to fix it. The people of that first dimension, Morty's parents in that dimension, his classmates, everyone, are left as Cronenberg monsters. Rick decides it's not worth fixing and moves on. This is one of the most morally compromised acts the show gives him, but there's one small thing worth noting for Morty's section. The new dimension Rick chooses is one where Morty's family is intact. He doesn't go to a dimension where he lives alone. He finds a place where Beth, Jerry, and Summer are all fine. He could have gone anywhere. He went somewhere Morty would have parents, a sister, a life. It's the minimum. It's not redemption for what preceded it, but it's evidence that even in his most callous moments, Rick considers where Morty will land. The biggest single moment in the Rick Saves Morty category comes in Season 2, Episode 1, A Rickle in Time, which aired July 26, 2015. Written by Matt Roller, directed by Wes Archer. The episode picks up immediately after the Season 1 finale's cliffhanger. Rick had frozen time to let the kids clean up the party mess, and now that time is being unfrozen, it's fractured by the uncertainty built up during those months outside the normal flow. Rick, Morty, and Summer exist in multiple simultaneous probability states. Their timeline is splitting and splitting again. A fourth-dimensional being arrives to resolve this with temporal collars. Things go sideways. A chase through multiplying timelines leads to a confrontation that fractures their continuity further. The climactic moment. Rick and Morty are falling through a quantum void, a space between timelines where causality doesn't apply. Morty's collar is broken, Rick's collar is working. They're both falling into nothingness. Rick gives Morty his collar. He reaches over and puts his working collar around Morty's neck, syncing up Morty's timelines so Morty can escape. He does this knowing, or believing, that it dooms him. With no working collar in the void, Rick would simply dissolve, not die in any dramatic sense, just cease to be. He says, "Be good, Morty. Be better than me." This line is important because of where it's said. There's no audience in the void. No one is watching except Morty, who is barely conscious enough to register what's happening. Rick isn't performing heroism. He isn't saying it for effect. He accepts what he genuinely believes is his own dissolution and uses what he thinks are his last moments to tell his grandson to be a better person than he was. He's saved immediately after by the other collar drifting by in the void. He grabs it, fixes it, and escapes. And then, as the episode notes, he immediately starts screaming at God. "Fuck you, God! Not today, bitch!" The sincerity gets swallowed by the joke. That's the show's signature move. The moment happened, and then it's buried. What the show is careful about is this. Rick didn't know the other collar was there. He made the choice to give Morty his collar, believing he was going to die. The fact that rescue materialized doesn't retroactively shrink the sacrifice. He made the choice with the information available to him, and the choice was to save Morty at the cost of himself. Total Recall, Season 2, Episode 4, August 16th, 2015. Written by Mike McMahon, directed by Juan Meza Leon. The Alien Parasite episode. Creatures that multiply by implanting false memories, pretending to be beloved people in the family's history. Rick figures out the mechanism. You can only remember bad things about real people. The parasites only create false positive memories. Rick quarantines the house immediately. This seems extreme, and the show plays it as extreme, but the logic is sound. The parasites spread through contact, and locking the house down is the only way to contain them. Rick is thinking about the whole world. The parasites could spread everywhere if they escape, but he's also thinking about the family. The quarantine protects both. He then arms himself and works through the house, fighting things wearing friendly faces because the parasites are wearing the appearances of beloved people. This is not easy to do. Rick shoots things that look like friends. He does it anyway because the alternative is leaving his family exposed to something that will eventually consume everything they believe about their own lives. There's a moment that tends to go unnoticed. Mr. Poopy Butthole, who turns out to be real, not a parasite, is shot by Beth, who made an error. When it becomes clear that Mr. Poopy Butthole might actually be dying, Rick rushes to him. Rick's response isn't calm. He's visibly disturbed. He gets Mr. Poopy Butthole care as quickly as possible. The episode's post-credit scene confirms that Mr. Poopy Butthole survives and has a long recovery. But in the moment when Rick thought a real friend might be dying because of a mistake made inside his quarantine, Rick moved. He moved fast. Morty Night Run, Season 2, Episode 2, August 3rd, 2015. Written by Nick Rutherford, directed by Dominic Polcino. This episode centers on Morty's moral crisis over Fart, the cloud-like alien being Rick was going to sell to an assassin named Krumbopolis Michael. Morty uses Rick's blaster to kill Krumbopolis Michael to save Fart, which sets off a chain of consequences involving a Gear World police chase. At multiple points during this episode, Rick is trying to clean up a mess Morty created by going against Rick's explicit instructions. Rick's frustration is genuine, but what's worth noting is what Rick does with that frustration. He doesn't abandon Morty to the consequences. He doesn't say, "You made this problem, you fix it." He stays in it with Morty, navigating the fallout, keeping Morty alive through the chaos, even as he's irritated by the situation. There's a moment toward the episode's end where Morty realizes that Fart, the alien he saved, intends to destroy all carbon-based life in the universe. Morty has to make an impossible choice. When Morty makes that choice, when he kills Fart himself, Rick is there. He doesn't celebrate it. He doesn't rub it in. He acknowledges the weight of what Morty just did. Rick has a sensitivity to what Morty is carrying. It's not expressed tenderly, but it's there. The Ricks Must Be Crazy, Season 2, Episode 6, August 30th, 2015. Written by Tom Kaufman, directed by Dominic Polcino. While Rick and Morty deal with a problem inside the microverse powering their ship's battery, Summer waits in the car. Rick, before he goes in, instructs the ship to keep Summer safe. The ship takes this extremely literally. When strangers approach the car, the ship maims them, traumatizes them, psychologically manipulates them. It's horrifying, and the show leans into the horror of it for comedic effect. But the underlying instruction, keep Summer safe, came from Rick. Before he went into the microverse, with no idea how long he'd be gone, Rick made sure something was protecting Summer. His protective instinct extends to whoever he's left behind, not just whoever's with him. Season 3, Episode 1, The Rick Shank Rickdemption, April 1st, 2017. Written by Mike McMahon, directed by Erica Hayes. This is one of the most analytically dense episodes in the show's run, and for Morty's section specifically, it matters because of what Rick does while apparently cooperating with the Galactic Federation. Rick is in Federation prison. He appears to be cooperating with an interrogator named Cornelius Daniel, who is connected via Neuralink to Rick's memories, trying to extract the formula for interdimensional travel. Rick lets this happen. He guides Cornelius Daniel through what looks like his origin story, a painful memory of Diane and young Beth, of Rick Prime's visit, of the bomb. He allows the Neuralink to run, and then he hijacks the entire thing. He transfers his consciousness into Cornelius Daniel's body. He begins running multiple simultaneous plans across different locations. He manipulates Federation military assets. He gets to the Citadel. He uses the chaos to get Morty and Summer to safety, and eventually, in the process of doing everything else, he collapses the Galactic Federation's economy by making its currency worthless, which frees Earth entirely from occupation. For Morty specifically, Rick navigated out of maximum security alien prison through multiple hostile organizations, specifically making sure that Morty and Summer got out first before he worried about anything else. The family's freedom was the primary objective, around which everything else was arranged. He did all of this while appearing to be a cooperative prisoner. The gap between Rick's appearance and what was actually happening during those scenes, a gap that the episode reveals at the end, is one of the show's most elegant structural moves. Morty's Mind Blowers, Season 3, Episode 8, September 17th, 2017. Written by Cody Ziegler, directed by Juan Meza Leon. This episode has Rick reveal that he maintains an archive of traumatic memories he's erased from Morty, experiences so bad that Morty asked to have them removed, or that Rick removed to protect Morty from carrying them. The memories range from embarrassing to genuinely disturbing. Morty failed a mission catastrophically. Morty was responsible for a death. Morty discovered something about the nature of reality that he couldn't process. What the episode reveals is that Rick Rick has been quietly managing Morty's psychological burden across their adventures. When something is too much, when the weight of what they've done threatens to break Morty in ways that can't be repaired, Rick removes it. He stores it. He carries the archive of Morty's worst experiences so Morty doesn't have to. There's something in that deserves real attention. Rick, who refuses to show vulnerability, who claims not to have emotional attachments, who insists on the meaninglessness of human experience. Rick has been running a memory archive of his grandson's traumas, has been tending to it, has been making quiet decisions over and over about what Morty can handle and what needs to go somewhere safer. That's care. It's strange care. It's care wrapped in violation of consent, arguably. Morty doesn't always choose what gets removed, but at its core, it's Rick looking at what his adventures cost Morty and trying to manage that cost. Solarix, Season 6, Episode 1, September 4th, 2022. Written by Scott Martyr and Rob Schraub. Directed by Lucas Gray. The Season 5 finale had Rick press a button that, in removing the portal gun's access to the central finite curve, also reset everyone who traveled between dimensions to their original home. The result? Rick is in the Cronenberg dimension, the one he and Morty abandoned after the Rick Potion incident, and Morty is in Rick Prime's dimension, alone. Rick's response in this episode is to prioritize getting Morty back above everything else. He's in the Cronenberg dimension. He could, arguably, take his time. He could look around at the world he destroyed years ago. He could try to find information about Rick Prime's dimension, given that he now knows that's where Rick Prime lives. Instead, he moves immediately to find a way back to Morty. He even explicitly faces a choice: stay in the Prime dimension long enough to look for information about Rick Prime, the person he's been hunting for decades, or go get Morty. He chooses Morty. He doesn't deliberate about it. He goes. This is the clearest statement the show gives of Rick's actual priority ranking. When it's Rick Prime, the person who killed his family, his reason for existing for decades, against Morty, Rick chooses Morty. Rick, a Mort Well Lived, Season 6, Episode 2, September 11th, 2022. Written by Dan Harmon, directed by Lucas Gray. Morty's consciousness ends up fragmented into multiple NPCs in the game Roy, A Life Well Lived. It's a full simulation. Every NPC in the game is now a version of Morty, with Morty's anxieties and memories and voice. Rick cannot leave without gathering all of Morty's fragmented consciousness back together and sending it home. This is not a quick process. Inside the game, Rick spends what feels like decades. The game's timeline is longer than the real-world timeline, working to convince Morty NPCs that they are real and that they need to consolidate. He inadvertently creates a religion in the process. He works through the problem with extreme patience, which is not something Rick is known for, because there is no shortcut. If he leaves without retrieving all of Morty, parts of Morty get left behind in the game. He doesn't leave anything behind. While all of this is happening, Summer, who is outside the game holding things together, is dealing with armed criminals who've taken over the arcade. Rick, from inside the game, gives her guidance. He coordinates from inside a simulated reality. He is managing Morty's rescue and Summer's safety simultaneously. Fear No More, Season 7, Episode 10, December 17th, 2023. Written by Albro Lundy, directed by Amos Posner. This is the Season 7 finale, and it does something specific and revealing about Rick's emotional relationship with Morty. The episode involves a dimension of pure fear, a space where a person is forced to confront what they're most afraid of. Rick's greatest fear, as revealed in this episode, centers on Morty. The specifics of how the show frames this are worth sitting with. Rick, who has claimed across 7 seasons to fear nothing meaningful, to be beyond the emotional attachments that produce fear, is confronted with scenarios involving Morty's suffering, Morty's death, losing Morty. These are what live at the bottom of Rick's psychology. For a character who has been insisting since the pilot that his relationship with Morty is practical, functional, based on brainwave compatibility, the revelation that Rick's deepest fear is something happening to Morty is the show making explicit something it had been demonstrating through action for years. Rick is not afraid of death. He has accepted his own death multiple times. He is afraid of losing Morty. That is a different and more specific kind of fear, and it is not the fear of a man who thinks of Morty as a cloaking device. Season 8 adds to this through Morty Daddy, the 9th episode, which aired July 20th, 2025. The episode involves Morty reconnecting with Morty Jr., his half-alien son from Season 1's Raising Gazorpazorp. Throughout the episode, Morty navigates questions of parental responsibility and estrangement. Rick's role in in this episode is supporting. He gives Morty room to work through his own situation rather than taking it over. This is its own form of maturation and how Rick handles Morty. In earlier seasons, Rick would absorb any problem into his own narrative. By season 8, there are episodes where Rick understands that Morty's growth requires Morty to handle things without Rick solving them. The act of stepping back, of letting Morty carry his own story, is a different form of care than rescuing him, but it's still care.
There are dozens of other individual moments across the series. Rick pushing Morty behind him in alien corridors. Rick arriving at the last possible moment when Morty has been taken hostage. Rick spending entire episodes working through elaborate rescue plans. But the pattern is clear enough now. Rick saves Morty constantly. He does it dramatically and quietly. He does it by giving him his only collar, and by shooting a king through a closing portal, and by spending apparent decades inside a video game retrieving every fragment of his grandson's scattered consciousness. He does it by erasing the memories that would break Morty's mind. He does it by choosing Morty over Rick Prime. He does it because Morty matters more to him than his persona allows him to say. And in the moments when circumstances force him to choose, when the choice becomes impossible to conceal with a joke, Rick always makes the same one. He saves Morty. Evil Morty is the show's most precise articulation of what Rick could have made Morty into. Evil Morty, whose backstory is slowly revealed across seasons 3, 5, and 7, is a Morty who is treated by his Rick as a tool, used, diminished, shaped by the Rick-Morty relationship into someone who decided, in response to that shaping, to become the most dangerous person in the multiverse. He is what happens when the Rick-Morty dynamic goes wrong at the fundamental level, when a Rick uses a Morty without ever giving him his collar. Evil Morty destroys the Citadel. He uses the Omega device. He finds the edge of the central finite curve, the region of the multiverse where Ricks dominate, and he blows past it into genuinely uncharted space, free of all Ricks forever. His freedom is real. His grievance was real. The damage done to him was real. And he stands as the show's implicit argument for why what Rick C-137 does differently with Morty matters. Rick C-137 gives Morty his collar, gives him the escape when Rick himself has none. That one gesture, that specific choice in a quantum void, is the clearest possible distinction between Rick C-137 and the Rick who made Evil Morty. In the moment when it was one collar and two people falling, Rick C-137 chose Morty. Evil Morty's Rick didn't, or some version of Rick didn't, and the Morty who grew up in the shadow of that choice became Evil Morty. Rick C-137's Morty grew up in the shadow of the collar in the void, of King Jellybean shot through the portal, of be good, be better than me. Morty grew up knowing in his bones that when it came down to it, his grandfather would choose him. That's not everything. Rick C-137 still endangered Morty, still failed him in specific ways, still produced psychological damage the Mindblower's archive quietly catalogs. But Evil Morty didn't grow up knowing his Rick would choose him. And the difference between those two Mortys is the difference between the show's protagonist and its most significant villain. The collar gave Rick's Morty a different story. There's something worth saying about the specific texture of how Rick helps Morty in moments of genuine crisis that distinguishes him from other characters who protect people. Rick doesn't perform protection. He doesn't announce it. He doesn't set up dramatic moments where his heroism can be appreciated. He acts, and then he moves on. The King Jellybean kill is the cleanest example of this. One action, no context, no speech, no expectation of recognition. The adventure was over. They were already leaving. Rick reached back through a closing portal and solved a problem that would never be acknowledged. This is worth contrasting with how most television handles protective moments. In most shows, the protection happens in front of the person being protected, or is eventually revealed to them with appropriate weight. The audience is given the dramatic beat. The characters get the emotional resolution. Rick denies everyone this. He denies Morty the knowledge of what Rick just did for him. He denies himself the gratitude. He denies the narrative the satisfying beat. And then he does it again and again across 8 seasons. The voicemail to Jerry about Trandor. Jerry doesn't know about the threat. He gets a message saying Rick took care of it, which, from Jerry's perspective, probably registers as Rick doing something inexplicable and slightly unnerving. There's no moment of relief from a danger Jerry didn't know was there, just Rick's voice on a recording saying, "I looked out for you." This pattern, Protection without performance, care without acknowledgement, love without witness is the show's most sustained argument about what Rick actually is underneath the persona. It's not an argument that needs to be stated, it just needs to be shown. And the show shows it, episode after episode, buried in noise, waiting for anyone paying close attention to find it. Section 3. Every time Rick saved Summer. Summer Smith starts the series in a peculiar position relative to Rick. She's not Morty. Morty is the companion, the partner, the person with the compatible brainwave pattern. Summer is the other one, the older sibling who is, in the show's earliest episodes, mostly orbiting the Rick and Morty axis rather than being part of it. She wants to matter. She's smart enough to know she's being excluded. She spends the early seasons angling her way into significance. What the show does over time is reveal that Rick sees Summer more clearly than he lets on. There's a scene in season 3 that captures this exactly. In the ABCs of Beth, September 24th, 2017, Rick tells Beth something oblique about Summer. He suggests that Summer might be more like Beth than Beth realizes, and more like Rick than anyone has acknowledged. It's not a compliment exactly, but it's Rick seeing Summer, categorizing her, recognizing that she has a kind of edge, a competence, a willingness to do difficult things that the show has been building quietly across 3 seasons. By season 4, Summer is increasingly a full partner in adventures. By season 6, she's doing a Die Hard in an alien arcade without having seen the movie. By season 8, she's running a tech empire inside a simulation and choosing to burn it down when Morty needs help. The arc from peripheral granddaughter to genuine partner is one of the show's quieter achievements. And Rick, for all his apparent indifference to Summer in the early seasons, has been part of creating that arc.
Raising Gazorpazorp, Season 1, Episode 7, March 10th, 2014. Written by Eric Acosta and Wade Randolph. Directed by Jeff Myers. This is Summer's first real adventure episode. Morty has bought a sex robot from alien vendors, which turns out to be a biological delivery system from the all-female planet Gazorpazorp. A half-alien baby results named Morty Jr. While Rick and Morty handle the Morty Jr. situation, Rick takes Summer with him to get a replacement cable at Gear World. They end up on Gazorpazorp, where males are kept enslaved and barely functional, and the dominant female culture is not interested in being studied by outsiders. Rick and Summer are captured. They're brought before the ruling class of Gazorpazorp. They face execution. Rick's response throughout this sequence is to stay with Summer. He doesn't abandon her. He doesn't use her as a distraction. He faces the same situation she faces beside her.
When a solution presents itself, Summer, being female, has standing in this society that Rick doesn't. Rick defers to her. He lets her take the lead in the negotiation that gets them both free. This is one of the show's first demonstrations that Rick will adapt his approach when Summer is the one who has the better path forward. He doesn't fight her for control of the situation. He steps back and lets her handle it, and they get out. Something Wicked This Way Comes. Season 1, Episode 9, March 24th, 2014. Written by Mike McMahon, directed by John Rice. The secondary plot of this episode involves Summer getting a job at a shop run by the devil, a shop where every item is magically cursed to give and then take. Summer figures this out, she quits. The devil retaliates by ruining her reputation, writing bad reviews, destroying her future employment prospects. Summer asks Rick for help. Rick's response is to help her prepare. He runs a montage, one of the show's more purely comedic sequences of Rick and Summer training together, building muscles, getting ready to physically confront the devil. It's absurd. It's also Rick taking Summer's problem seriously enough to work through it with her. They fight the devil. They beat him. Not metaphorically, they go to the devil's business and beat him up with their newly gained muscle mass. Rick doesn't explain this as a teaching moment. He doesn't turn it into a lesson about Rick's superiority. He and Summer have the same goal in this sequence, and Rick treats the goal as valid. The detail that often gets noted about this episode is that Rick enjoyed it. He and Summer, pumped up and triumphant, go around beating up other wrongdoers after the devil is handled. Rick is not doing this out of obligation. He's doing this because fighting the devil with his granddaughter was genuinely fun. Autoerotic Assimilation. Season 2, Episode 3, August 9th, 2015. Written by Ryan Ridley. Directed by Don
Dominic Pulcino. The main plot of this episode involves Rick reconnecting with Unity, his ex-lover, a hive mind that controls an entire planetary population. Rick slides into Unity's world with complete ease. He's at home in the chaos of a hive mind that loves him without complication. Beth and Jerry, exploring Rick's ship during this episode, find Summer locked in an alien cage in the ship's storage. She's in a cage. She's been there, apparently, for some period of time as collateral from a previous deal Rick made. This is not a heroic moment for Rick. This is one of the genuinely terrible things the show gives him. Rick used Summer as collateral in some kind of alien deal and then apparently forgot about it or deprioritized it. She was in a cage on his ship, but it connects to Summer's section in a specific way. It's the kind of moment the show uses to establish the stakes of what Rick's negligence actually costs. Summer, who is trying to matter to Rick, who is trying to be part of his world, finds herself literally caged as a consequence of that proximity. This is one of the show's clearest statements that Rick's protection of the people around him is inconsistent, that it has gaps, that it fails. And then, later in the same season, Rick's protection of Summer becomes more reliable and more intentional. The negligence doesn't disappear. It never entirely disappears, but the pattern shifts. Big Trouble in Little Sanchez, Season 2, Episode 7, September 13th, 2015. Written by Ryan Ridley, directed by Juan Meza Leon. The A-plot of this episode involves Rick transferring his consciousness into a clone of his teenage self, Tiny Rick, so he can go undercover at Morty and Summer's school to hunt a vampire. The B-plot involves Beth and Jerry going to alien marriage counseling with disturbing results. For Summer specifically, she invites Tiny Rick to join her social world at school. She sponsors him, essentially. She vouches for him to her friends. And Tiny Rick is, at least initially, a genuine social success. Charming, energetic, fun in a way regular Rick never is. But Summer is also the first person to notice that something is wrong. She recognizes that Tiny Rick, despite his enthusiasm, is deteriorating. The teenage clone body is starting to override Rick's consciousness. Tiny Rick is getting stuck, his adult mind beginning to lose to the teenage body's emotional limitations. Summer and Morty have to save Rick. They recognize the danger before anyone else does. They pull Rick back. For this section's purposes, Rick entered Summer's world to deal with a threat at her school. He put himself in a vulnerable situation, inside a clone body that could have trapped him to do it. He trusted Summer and Morty to recognize the signs if it went wrong. And Summer was the one who noticed first. That's a kind of trust, extended sideways. Rick didn't tell Summer to watch for the signs of deterioration. She just watched, and when the time came, she moved. The Season 2 finale, The Wedding Squanchers, October 4th, 2015, contains a significant Summer moment that tends to get overshadowed by Rick's surrender to the Galactic Federation. But Summer's role in that sequence is worth examining. When Rick turns himself in, when the Galactic Federation comes for him in the bar, the family is watching at home. Beth, Morty, Summer, Jerry, they see it on the news. Summer's response to the announcement that Rick has been arrested is not passive. In the Season 3 premiere, The Rick Shank Redemption, Summer is the one who insists on going to rescue Rick. She's the one who drives the mission. She recruits Morty. She navigates the situation at the Citadel. This matters for what it says about what Rick built with Summer across 2 seasons. He didn't have a warm, openly loving relationship with her. He was frequently dismissive. He used her as a hostage at least once, and yet she was the one who moved first when he was in danger. The person who motivated the rescue mission was Summer. That's not nothing. That's someone who, despite everything, loves her grandfather. And somewhere, underneath Rick's persona, he built something with Summer that produced that loyalty. Rick, a Mort Well Lived, Season 6, Episode 2, September 11th, 2022, has a specific Summer element worth noting separately from the Morty analysis. When Morty's consciousness fractures into the Roy game, Rick can't leave to deal with the crisis happening outside, armed criminals invading the arcade. He has to send Summer instead. He guides her from inside the game, giving her the frame for a Die Hard, a reference she doesn't understand because she's never seen the movie. What's striking is that Rick's guidance is calibrated. He doesn't give Summer a perfect plan, he gives her a framework and trusts her to improvise. He knows Summer well enough to know she can work within a structure she doesn't fully understand. The film's criminal leader has based his entire plan on Die Hard, which makes him predictable in ways Summer can can exploit precisely because she isn't constrained by knowledge of the movie. Rick saw this. He understood that Summer's ignorance of Die Hard was, in this specific context, an advantage. He built the strategy around her actual capabilities rather than trying to impose a plan she wasn't suited for. They succeed. Summer takes down a hostage situation without having seen the movie she's supposedly replicating. Rick gets Morty out of the game. Season 8, Episode 1, Summer of All Fears, May 25th, 2025. Written by Albro Lundy, James Siciliano, and Michael Kellner. Directed by Erica Hayes. The Season 8 premiere opens with Rick punishing Morty and Summer for not returning his phone charger by putting them in an experience machine, a simulation where the consequences of phone charger negligence are treated as life or death serious. This is not a heroic thing for Rick to do. It's petty and extreme, and the show doesn't frame it as anything else. But Rick falls asleep while monitoring the simulation. What was supposed to be a brief punishment turns into Morty and Summer spending the equivalent of 17 years inside a fake reality. Morty goes through wars. Summer becomes a tech entrepreneur and builds a near monopoly on lithium. When they get out, they're traumatized. Not metaphorically, the episode takes the trauma seriously. Morty has war PTSD. Summer has the psychological weight of having built an empire and watched it become something she never intended. Rick's response to the trauma is, initially, inadequate. He doesn't engage with it properly. He dismisses it, brushes it off. The show is honest about this. He caused it through negligence, and his initial response to the consequences is not good enough. But what happens next is revealing. Morty eventually traps Rick in a version of his own simulation. The episode's climax involves Rick being given a taste of what he put them through, and Rick's response to this reversal, when it happens, doesn't involve fighting it or rage. He absorbs it. He experiences the consequence. And at the end, all three of them have their memories reset. Rick makes this choice, wiping the simulation memories for all three of them to let them go back to a functional baseline. It's a reset rather than a reckoning, which is a fair criticism, but it's also Rick, in his own imperfect way, trying to restore the status quo because he knows what he did was wrong. The episode is about Rick's failures as much as anything, but inside the failure is a thread of attempted repair. There's a larger pattern worth naming across Summer's arc. Summer doesn't start the series as someone Rick pays attention to. She earns her way into his regard through competence, through showing that she can handle difficult situations, through demonstrating that she has a version of Rick's willingness to do what the moment requires. Rick responds to this. He adjusts his treatment of Summer as Summer demonstrates her capabilities. This isn't entirely fair to Summer. She should matter to Rick regardless of whether she can fight a devil or manage an alien hostage situation. The conditionality of Rick's regard is one of his failures as a grandfather, but within the show's logic, it also means that Summer's relationship with Rick is one she has agency in. She built it. She expanded it. She made herself someone Rick takes seriously. And Rick, when Summer is in genuine danger, shows up. He stays with her on Gazorpazorp. He trains with her for the devil fight. He coordinates her through a hostage situation from inside a video game. He builds a world safe enough for her to operate in. The protection isn't always obvious. It's not always what Summer would choose, but it's real, and it's consistent, and it gets more reliable as the show progresses. There are a few more Summer moments from across the seasons that deserve space here before moving on. Wet Kuat Amortican Summer, Season 7, Episode 3, November 26, 2023. Written by Cody Ziegler, directed by Juan Meza Leon. This episode gives Summer a specific kind of episode structure that the show had been building towards since Season 3. An adventure where the emotional core is Summer's choices rather than Rick or Morty's. Summer is navigating a situation that has its own stakes, its own complications, and its own resolution, and Rick's role is supporting rather than central. What's worth noting is what Rick does in the background. He monitors. He makes sure she has what she needs without making himself the protagonist of her story. This is Rick learning something about Summer, that she doesn't need to be saved in the way that Morty often needs to be saved. She needs to be trusted. She needs space. She needs the confidence that comes from not having Rick swoop in. Rick gives her that space, and when things go sideways enough that intervention is actually necessary, he's available. He hasn't left, he just stepped back far enough to let her drive. This kind of knowing restraint, understanding when to protect by staying out of the way, is a different sophistication than the visible, dramatic rescues. It requires Rick to accurately read what Summer needs rather than what would make Rick feel most
most useful. By season 7, he's gotten better at it. The season 6 premiere, Solarix, has a detail about Summer that belongs here. When the portal reset scatters everyone to their home dimensions, Summer ends up in the situation of having to help piece things back together while Rick and Morty are lost. She's not the one who goes to find them. In this episode, she's supporting from the household's end, but her competence in managing a crisis that she didn't cause and can't fully control is visible. She was put in an impossible position, again, through Rick's actions, and she managed it. She managed it because Rick, across 5 seasons of dragging her into impossible positions, had inadvertently given her the skills to handle them. There's something bitter about this. Rick made Summer capable of handling disasters, partly by creating disasters for her to handle. The training was real, even when the method of delivering it was irresponsible. The season 8, episode 9, Morty Daddy episode has a small Summer beat worth mentioning in her section. Summer and Rick dine at an upscale restaurant in this episode. It's a side plot. The main narrative is Morty reconnecting with Morty Jr., but the simple fact of Rick choosing to spend time with Summer in a context that isn't a crisis or an adventure or a problem to solve is worth noting. They're just eating dinner together. Rick takes Summer somewhere nice. They talk. The show doesn't make a big deal of this. It probably shouldn't, but after seasons of building toward a relationship where Rick takes Summer seriously as a person rather than just a useful person, arriving at an episode where they just eat dinner is a kind of payoff. It's small. It's real. That's often how Rick's affection works. It arrives quietly in the form of an ordinary evening when no one is looking. There's a pattern across Summer's arc that's worth naming cleanly before moving on. In the early seasons, Rick protected Summer from immediate threats. Gazorpazorp, the devil, the various invasions of the Smith household. These are reactive protections.
Something threatens Summer, and Rick responds. By the middle seasons, Rick's protection of Summer becomes more active and trust-based. He gives her the ship's autonomous protection. He coordinates her through the Die Hard. He brings her into plans rather than keeping her at the margins. By the later seasons, Rick's protection of Summer is expressed through presence and respect. He lets her handle things. He trusts her to handle things. He treats her as someone worth treating well. That arc, from reactive to trust-based to presence, is what healthy protection looks like when it's working. Rick gets there with Summer across 8 seasons. It's not the arc he planned. It's not the arc anyone would design, but it's real and it happened, and Summer is better for it than she would have been if Rick hadn't stayed. Something worth saying directly about Summer's arc. The competence she develops across the series is not incidental to Rick. Summer becomes capable of handling crises, partly because Rick has put her in crises. This is, again, not an argument for Rick's methods. It's a description of the outcome. Rick's recklessness, applied to Summer across multiple seasons, produced someone who knows what to do when things go wrong, because things have gone wrong around her many times and she has had to figure it out. The Whirly-Durly experience, where Jerry and Beth go to alien marriage counseling while Rick goes on adventure with Jerry and Summer is left to manage the home situation, is one example. Summer of All Fears is another. Rick, a Mort well-lived, is a third. In each case, Summer is handed a problem beyond her initial experience and expected to solve it. She does, every time. Not perfectly, but she does it. By season 8, Summer is someone the show can put in a hostage situation and trust the audience to believe she'll get out. That believability, the sense that Summer is genuinely capable, is earned across 7 seasons of Rick putting her in impossible positions and watching her find her way through them. The protection Rick offers Summer is not always warm or intentional. Some of it is accidental, some of it is incidental, and some of it is downright negligent. But the cumulative effect is that Summer grows up to be someone Rick can actually trust with difficult things, and who can trust herself in situations most people would find overwhelming. Rick built this, not through careful mentorship, through chaos, which is, characteristically and infuriatingly, how Rick does things. It works anyway. Despite everything, it works. There is one more Summer moment that belongs here, even though it's brief. In the season 7 finale, Fear No Mort, when Rick confronts his deepest fears in the dimension of pure fear, the fears are organized around losing Morty. But the episode's structure also implicates the whole family in what Rick is afraid of. The fears that surface are fears of loss, of specific people being taken from him. Summer is in that architecture. She's part of what Rick is afraid to lose. The fear dimension doesn't rank the family members. It surfaces what Rick has been building for years, a life with people in it that he is afraid to not have. Summer is one of those people. The show doesn't make a performance of this. It doesn't need to. 8 seasons of building the relationship makes the fear dimension's logic clear without any explanation explanation. Rick is afraid to lose Summer. That's the whole statement. Hidden in the structure of a fear episode, unannouncedly, without drama, Rick loves his granddaughter. He showed up for her on Gazorpazorp. He fought the devil with her. He trusts her with Die Hard.
He built something with her across 8 seasons that turned her from a peripheral character into one of the people he's afraid to lose. That is Rick Sanchez's heroism towards Summer compressed to its essential statement. He built something worth being afraid to lose. Section 4. Every time Rick saved Beth. Beth Smith is the most complicated figure in Rick's life. Not Morty, not Birdperson, Beth. Because Beth is the reason everything else is happening. She is the daughter of the woman Rick lost, the child who grew up mostly without him, the adult who never fully let go of the need for a father's approval. And she is, at the same time, the woman Rick is in some sense deceiving simply by being present, because the Beth who is alive, the Beth of the Smith household, is not his original Beth. His original Beth died. She died with Diane when Rick Prime sent a bomb through a portal into the garage of Rick C-137's home. She was a child. There was no graduation, no wedding, no horse surgery career, no Morty. The original Beth Sanchez of Dimension C-137 never got to grow up. Rick C-137 spent decades searching for the Rick who killed his family. He failed. Eventually, exhausted and still grieving, he landed in a dimension where a version of Beth had survived and grown into an adult, where she had a family of her own, a house in the suburbs, 2 kids, and a horse surgeon's career, and a husband named Jerry. He inserted himself into her life as her returning father. The Beth he lives with doesn't know this in its entirety. She knows he was absent for most of her life. She doesn't know that from Rick's perspective, she is both entirely real and a stand-in for someone he couldn't bring back. This makes every moment of Rick's protection of Beth carry an additional weight. He isn't just protecting his daughter, he is protecting the version of his daughter who survived. He is, in the quiet moments when no one is watching, giving this Beth what his original Beth never got, a father who shows up. The most direct confrontation between Rick and Beth about their relationship comes in The ABCs of Beth, Season 3, Episode 9, September 24th, 2017. Written by Dan Harmon, directed by John Rice. The episode begins with a man named Tommy Lipkip's father about to be executed for the alleged murder of Tommy, who disappeared in childhood. Beth has a half memory of a magical world, Fruipyland, where she and Tommy played as children. She asks Rick about it. Rick reveals that Fruipyland was real, a pocket dimension he built for Beth when she was small. He built it because young Beth was asking him for weapons, laser guns, poison darts, mind control devices. She was 7 years old and she was designing instruments of harm. So Rick built her a safe pocket dimension where she could be herself, her dangerous self, without hurting anyone. The revelation about why Fruipyland was built is uncomfortable. Rick is essentially admitting he built it to contain Beth as much as to nurture her. He prioritized protecting the neighborhood over engaging with the darkness in his daughter. He chose a workaround over a conversation. But then Beth pushes him. She says he would rather believe she's fundamentally broken, fundamentally evil, than admit he was a bad father. That it's easier for him to see her as dangerous than to face his own failures. And Rick says, without hesitation, without deflection, "Oh dude, no, bad father all the way to the max over here." This is an extraordinary moment in the show's history. Rick admits fault, plainly, without qualifications. He says he was a bad father. He says it like he's been waiting for someone to give him permission to say it. He goes further. He reads back the list of weapons young Beth requested, a long, dark list. And the way he reads it has a kind of grim recognition in it. He sees himself in young Beth, her violence, her creativity, her willingness to go further than other people would go. He kept her at arm's length for years, partly because looking at her was like looking at himself. After they adventure together through Fruipyland and resolve the Tommy situation, Rick offers Beth something the show had been building toward, the choice. She can stay in her life, resume the marriage with Jerry, be a mother in the suburbs, be a horse surgeon, or Rick can make a clone of her and she can go explore the universe the way Rick does. She can have the freedom freedom Rick never offered her. Beth takes time with this choice. The season 4 episode, Star Mort Rickturn of the Jerry, reveals that she did take the offer, that a space Beth exists, having adventures of her own, while the Beth at home continued her life. Rick erased his own memory of which one made which choice, so that he would treat both equally. This is an act of protection that deserves unpacking.
Rick could have known which Beth was the original.
He erased that knowledge deliberately. He chose not to know because knowing would mean having a preference, and having a preference would mean treating one Beth differently from the other. By removing his own memory, he ensured that both Beths would get an equal Rick. Both would get the father. He gave himself a lobotomy, destroyed his own access to important personal information in order to protect both of his daughters equally. That is an extraordinary form of care wrapped in what looks like confusion. Star Mort Rickturn of the Jerry, Season 4, Episode 10, May 31st, 2020. This episode is where the two Beth situation becomes an active crisis. Space Beth has been working with the Defiance, an anti-Federation resistance group. Tammy, now an agent of the Federation, has been hunting her. The Federation sends a squad to Dr. Wong's office to kill Space Beth. But it's Earth Beth who's at Dr. Wong's office. Rick races to Dr. Wong's office when the Federation soldiers arrive. He's operating without knowing which Beth this is. It doesn't matter. A version of his daughter is at risk. Federation soldiers are moving on her location, and Rick runs toward it. He doesn't calculate which Beth is more valuable to him. He doesn't wait to see if Space Beth handles it herself. He moves. He arrives. He fights. He gets Earth Beth out. The episode ends with both Beths reunited in the same room, an emotionally complicated meeting between two versions of the same person, one who stayed and one who left. Rick, in this moment, is looking at both his daughters. He chose not to know which was the original. He has two daughters now. He protects them both. There's also the Tammy resolution in this episode. Rick kills Tammy, the woman who murdered Birdperson at the wedding, the Federation agent who has been hunting Space Beth. Rick kills her, not by accident, deliberately. The woman who destroyed what was once Rick's closest friendship, who has been threatening his daughters. Rick removes her from the equation. This, too, is protection. The elimination of a persistent threat is a form of keeping people safe. Rickturnal Friendshine of the Spotless Mort. Season 5, Episode 8, August 8th, 2021. Written by James Siciliano, directed by Antoine Demouy. This episode is primarily about Rick restoring Birdperson's mind, but it contains a detail about Rick's relationship to fatherhood that illuminates the Beth section. While Rick is inside Birdperson's memory space, he discovers that Birdperson and Tammy had a daughter, a child conceived before the events of the wedding squanchers. This daughter is real. She exists, presumably somewhere in Galactic Federation custody. Birdperson, when converted into Phoenix Person, had his memories of her removed. Rick discovers this before he revives Birdperson. He is alone with the knowledge.
He considers not telling Birdperson, because telling him means Birdperson will want to find her, which will mean more danger, more complications, more unfinished business. Rick, who has just spent significant effort bringing his friend back, considers protecting their reunion by withholding the information. He tells Birdperson anyway. He cannot keep a father from knowledge of his child. When you know what Rick lost, the original Beth, the original Diane, the childhood he was supposed to have given his daughter, this choice becomes clear. Rick cannot look at a father who doesn't know his child is alive and choose to keep that from him. Whatever the cost, whatever the complication, he tells Birdperson. This is protection of a different kind. Rick is protecting Birdperson's right to be a father, because Rick understands at the deepest possible level what it means not to have that right. The ABCs of Beth post-credit scene adds one more small Beth note.
After Rick gives Beth the choice, stay or clone and go, he doesn't wait around to see what she picks. He leaves. In the post-credit sequence, he calls Jerry's voicemail about the Trandor situation. He's moved on to the next thing. This is characteristic of how Rick handles emotional peaks. He does the important thing. He says the true thing, and then he leaves before the weight of it can settle into something he'd have to respond to. He gives Beth her choice and walks away so Beth can actually make it without him in the room influencing the outcome. That's a kind of respect for her autonomy that Rick doesn't always manage. Season 8, Episode 10, Hot Rick, July 27th, 2025. Written by Albro Lundy and James Siciliano. Directed by Brian Kaufman. This is the Season 8 finale, and it is, in terms of Rick and Beth's relationship, the most emotionally significant Beth episode since the ABCs of Beth in Season 3. It is, arguably, the culmination culmination of what the show has been building about Rick's grief and his relationship to Beth. The episode's premise? Rick has been trying to move on from Diane. He's seeing someone new, an alien woman named Bug Ann. He's making gestures toward a future, but the Omega device, the weapon Rick Prime used in Season 7's Unmore Trickin' to erase Diane from every dimension, has tampered with his memories. He only has fragments of Diane, and so does Beth. Beth only thinks she remembers her mom, as Rick says in the episode. Memory Rick, a fragment of Rick's consciousness that had previously escaped into an ant farm, has been tampering with the family's memories. He infiltrated Jerry's mind first, filling Jerry's memories with false images of Rick as a devoted, loving, present father. Jerry ends up with warm memories of Rick that don't match reality, which is immediately suspicious to real Rick, who knows he has never been that person. Rick extracts Memory Rick and contains him, but Memory Rick finds a way into Beth's mind. He is trying to find the last secure memory of Diane, which he believes will let him reconstruct her, or at least reconstruct a version of her experience. Memory Rick, as a fragment of Rick's mind, carries the same obsession with Diane that Rick does, but without Rick's hard-won acceptance of the loss. What happens in Beth's mind becomes a crisis. The sentient memories influence Beth's actual behavior. She begins to make choices that aren't fully hers. The episode builds to a moment where Beth, standing outside, is holding a gun. She says she just wants it to end. She says she remembers loving her dad, and then hating him. And then Rick appears. He comes to Beth. He admits in the open air that he wasn't there for her, that he failed her. He says it simply, without elaborate deflection. He tells her he is there now. Beth lowers the gun. And then, in a moment that is simultaneously tender and deeply Rick, he sedates her. He inserts a finger syringe and renders her unconscious because he needs to remove the Memory Rick apparatus from her head. She wakes up in the sub-basement where Rick has set up the equipment. She asks about her mother. Rick tells her she knew Diane because Diane raised her. Even though the Omega device corrupted their memories, enough survived for Rick to say with certainty Diane loved her. She was real. The love was real. Beth, who has spent her entire life half remembering a mother she barely knew, gets this from Rick. Not a perfect memory, not a resurrection, but the knowledge that Diane was there, that the love was real. This is Rick showing up for Beth in the way that costs him the most. Not physical risk, but emotional exposure. Admitting the failures, saying she mattered, being present for her in the moment she's falling apart. At the episode's close, Rick goes to his space and releases his own memory of Diane. He deletes it. He sends it into space rather than carry it. He is, in the most Rick way possible, deciding to move on, not by healing conventionally, but by literally jettisoning the part of him that can't let go. This is Rick's final reconciliation with the grief that has defined him since before the pilot episode. The deletion of his Diane memory is not forgetting, it's choosing, finally, to live in the present instead of the past. And the choice is made, in part, because of Beth. Because sitting with Beth in the sub-basement, watching her grieve a mother she only half remembers, Rick decided that the grief was done enough. It was time to be here with the daughter who survived. He had spent decades honoring the original Beth who didn't make it. Season 8 is where he begins to fully inhabit life with the Beth who did. There are smaller moments across the seasons that belong here too. In Autoerotic Assimilation, Season 2, Episode 3, when Rick's near-suicidal breakdown happens in the garage, Beth is the one who checks on him the morning after. She sees him slumped in his chair. She's worried, genuinely, in a way that is quiet and untranslated into anything explicit. She brings him a cup of coffee, or similar, the gesture of a person who saw the darkness and is choosing to act normally as a way of continuing to the present. She shows up for him. He shows up for her. They do this in a way that neither of them can name. In The Rick and Morty Date, Season 3, Episode 10, when the season ends and Jerry and Beth reconcile, Rick has to decide what he does with that reconciliation. He's been leveraging Beth's preference for him over Jerry. Now, Jerry is back. Rick could make this difficult. He doesn't. He accepts the reconciliation. He chooses not to fight for Beth's preference over Jerry's presence, because Beth's happiness requires both of them. That's a kind of selflessness that doesn't look like selflessness. It looks like Rick grudgingly accepting something, but the grudging acceptance is a choice, and the choice is made for Beth. The through line of Rick and Beth's relationship across 8 seasons is this. Rick is a man who is trying, imperfectly and inconsistently, to be the father he wasn't there to be. He fails often. He's absent in the ways that matter, and present in the ways that are complicated. He tells the truth when the truth is difficult and deflects when the truth is unbearable. But he stays. He keeps staying. He could leave. He has the portal gun and the ability to go anywhere, when. He stays in the Smith household. He keeps coming back. He keeps showing up in the garage and the backyard and the moments of crisis. He is, in the most fundamental sense, trying. And for a man whose entire persona is built on not trying, on being above the effort of caring, that trying is everything. The Beth section benefits from examining a few episodes that illuminate the dynamic from different angles. The Whirly-Durly Conspiracy, Season 3, Episode 5, August 20th, 2017. Written by Ryan Ridley, directed by Anthony Chun. This episode is primarily a Jerry episode. Rick takes Jerry on an adventure that is partly pity and partly genuine care, but there's a Beth dimension to it that belongs here. During the episode, Summer is going through a crisis at home involving body image and a transformation device. Beth tries to help Summer in her own fumbling way. Rick isn't present for this. He's with Jerry, but the episode is structured so that Beth is handling a family crisis without Rick, and what we see is Beth being, in her own way, exactly the kind of broken person Rick is. Well-meaning, overwhelmed, choosing imperfect solutions. Beth and Rick mirror each other. The show has been making this argument slowly across all 3 seasons up to this point, but the Whirly-Durly Conspiracy makes it explicit through contrast. Rick is away and Beth is home, doing the same kind of inadequate but genuine management of a family crisis that Rick does when he's present. Rick's protection of Beth, in this light, includes something harder to name: the way his presence in Beth's life has normalized the idea of trying even when you're not equipped to succeed. Beth saw Rick try, even if what Rick tried was imperfect. She learned, imperfectly, from an imperfect model, that you keep showing up for the people who need you. Beth's dogs, or rather, the sequence in M. Night Shyamalan's Season 1, Episode 4, January 13th, 2014, deserves a moment. When Rick is in the simulation, the Zygerian alien simulation trying to get his interdimensional travel formula, his behavior in the simulation still reflects his actual values. He refuses to give the formula. He fights the simulation. He maintains his core commitments even when there's no audience for them, even when the entire world around him is fake. And there's a moment in the simulation's aftermath where Rick deals with Jerry's post-simulation disorientation in a way that's unexpectedly decent. He sits with Jerry in the immediate confusion. He doesn't exploit the moment. For a few minutes, in the immediate aftermath of a deeply disorienting experience, Rick is simply present without mockery. He won't sustain it. By the next episode, he's back to the usual dynamic, but the capacity is there. When people are disoriented and vulnerable, Rick sometimes sets down the contempt long enough to be human about it. Big Trouble in Little Sanchez, Season 2, Episode 7, gives a Beth note that belongs in her section specifically. While Rick is at school as Tiny Rick, Beth and Jerry are at alien couples counseling. The alien counselors, who deal with interspecies relationships, decode the ways Beth and Jerry relate to each other by externalizing their psychologies as creatures. The creature that represents Beth is striking. It's powerful. It's sharp. It's dangerous. The therapist reacts with concern, and Beth's response to seeing what the therapist sees in her is complicated. She's disturbed by it, but she also recognizes it. When the episode ends, Rick has been pulled back from Tiny Rick by Summer and Morty. Beth and Jerry, having seen themselves clearly in the alien therapy session, have done something the show will develop over the subsequent seasons. They've started to acknowledge what their relationship actually contains rather than what they perform it to contain. Rick's role in this is indirect. He built Fruipyland partly because of what he saw in young Beth. He knows what she's capable of. The episode, by showing Beth in the therapy session, is connecting Rick's understanding of Beth to Beth's own self-knowledge. He saw her clearly. He always saw her clearly. He just didn't know what to do with what he saw. Bethic Twinstinct, Season 6, Episode 3, September 18th, 2022. The episode involving both Beths spending time together at the Smith household explores what happens when the two versions of Beth have to actually coexist rather than exist in parallel. They've circled each other before. This episode puts them in the same domestic space. Rick is present for this in a specific way. He's watching two versions of his daughter interact. He erased his own memory of which is the original. From his perspective, he has two daughters, equally real, equally his, figuring out how to share a family. family. He doesn't interfere unnecessarily. He lets them navigate it. He's available if needed. The episode reveals something complicated about what the Beth clone option actually produced. Not a solution, but a new kind of problem, a new kind of relationship that needed its own working through. Rick created this situation, and he's present for the working through, even when he's not the one doing the work. The most under-examined dimension of Rick's heroism toward Beth is that he protects her from knowledge he has and she doesn't. Rick knows he is not her father in the simple, biological, continuous sense. He knows he showed up in her adult life from another dimension, inserting himself into the life of a Beth who wasn't his original Beth, presenting himself as the returning father. From Rick's perspective, he is performing fatherhood for a daughter who survived while his original daughter didn't. Beth doesn't know the full weight of this. She knows Rick was absent. She knows their relationship is complicated. She doesn't know that, from Rick's perspective, every moment with her is simultaneously real and an act of grief management. Rick chooses to let Beth experience him as simply her father rather than this more complicated truth. He absorbs the complexity. He carries it. He gives Beth the uncomplicated version of the relationship, complicated enough on its own terms, while managing the additional layer of mourning alone. This is protection through silence. It is, arguably, also deception. The show doesn't fully resolve whether Rick should have told Beth more. It presents both the protection and the cost of what isn't said and lets the tension exist. But the intention at its core is protective. Rick decided that Beth deserved a father who was simply there, rather than a father who was there while explaining that her survival was both precious and a reminder of what he lost. He gave her the simpler version. He kept the harder one for himself.
Section 5. Every time Rick saved Jerry. This section is probably the most analytically interesting of the group because Rick hates Jerry, not in the ambient, generalized way that indifferent people dislike someone. Rick's contempt for Jerry is specific, articulate, and eloquently expressed over many seasons. He believes Jerry is small, insecure, lacking in the kind of self-awareness that would let him be better. He believes Jerry got Beth pregnant at 17 and derailed what might have been a brilliant life into a small, suburban existence. He calls Jerry my daughter's idiot in moments when he's trying to be relatively polite. Some of this contempt has dimensions of jealousy in it. The show acknowledges this. Jerry gets Beth's uncomplicated love in a way Rick never manages. Jerry is present in the household in a way Rick never was when Beth was growing up. Dan Harmon has described Rick's contempt for Jerry as partly about what Jerry represents, the ordinary smallness Rick is terrified of becoming, the acceptance of limitation Rick has defined his entire identity against. But the contempt is also sincere. Rick genuinely doesn't think much of Jerry as a person, and yet Rick saves Jerry repeatedly, sometimes dramatically, sometimes in ways so quiet that Jerry doesn't even know it happened. This is one of the most revealing things the show does with Rick's character, that his relationship with someone he claims to despise contains real acts of protection, real consideration of Jerry's well-being, real choices made in Jerry's favor. The question is why, and the show never quite answers it cleanly. The most honest reading is this: Jerry is part of Beth's life. Jerry is Morty and Summer's father, and Rick, who has made the choice to stay with this family, has extended his protection, however grudgingly, however inconsistently, to everyone the family contains, including the person he finds most difficult to respect. The Whirly-Durly Conspiracy, Season 3, Episode 5, August 20th, 2017. Written by Ryan Ridley, directed by Anthony Chun. This is the essential Jerry episode, and it begins with something that should not be possible. Morty asking Rick to take Jerry somewhere to help him feel better. Not Summer, Morty. Morty, who has absorbed years of Rick's contempt for Jerry, who has watched Rick treat his father as a figure of fun, approaches Rick with a request to do something kind for Jerry. The reason? Jerry has moved out of the house following his and Beth's separation. He's in a small, depressing apartment. He's fragile. Morty thinks his father might be suicidal. He asks Rick to help. Rick resists, of course. The ask is almost categorically absurd from the outside. Rick taking Jerry on an adventure out of the goodness of his heart. But Morty asks, and Rick goes. He takes Jerry to an interstellar resort called the Weirdatron, a resort that exists inside an immortality field. Inside the field, nobody can die. The idea, though unstated, is that Rick is creating a safety net specifically designed for Jerry's fragility. Even in a Rick adventure, Jerry won't be able to get killed because Rick chose a place where that's impossible. This is protective design. Rick set up the conditions of the adventure with Jerry's vulnerability in mind before they even arrived. What happens next is complicated. Risotto Groupon, a deposed planetary leader working at the resort's petting zoo, recruits Jerry into an assassination plot against Rick. He convinces Jerry that Rick is the source of his problems, that getting rid of Rick would free Beth to love Jerry properly again. Jerry, grieving and vulnerable, listens. He wavers. He participates in the early stages of the plot, and then he doesn't go through with it. When the moment comes, when Rick is on the whirly-durly, the roller coaster that briefly exits the immortality field, Jerry chooses not to act. He warns Rick. In the aftermath, hurtling through a wormhole with risotto as time distorts around them, Rick and Jerry actually talk. Rick tells Jerry things he has never said directly, that the situation with Beth is complicated, that Rick's own failures are part of what happened, that Jerry didn't ruin Beth's life as simply as Rick has always implied. It's not praise. Rick doesn't suddenly admire Jerry, but it's honest in a way that Rick almost never is with Jerry. The episode's end involves Rick making a small, quiet gesture. He took Jerry to a dangerous resort in a universe that wants to kill him. He sat with Jerry through a conversation that was genuinely difficult for both of them. He kept Jerry alive, not just physically, but in the softer sense. He tried to give Jerry something worth surviving for. M. Night Shame Aliens, Season 1, Episode 4, January 13th, 2014. Written by M. Night Shame Aliens, credited fictionally in the style of the episode's title, actually written by M. Spencer Porter and directed by Jeff Myers. Rick is trapped in a simulation within a simulation by the Zygerion aliens, who are trying to extract the formula for concentrated dark matter from him. Jerry has wandered into the outer simulation by accident. The aliens include him in the simulation because they might need him as leverage. After Rick defeats the simulation, after he identifies it and plays along while feeding the Zygerions false information that causes their ship to explode, he finds Jerry in the aftermath. Jerry is confused, slightly shattered, having experienced what seemed like the best day of his life inside the simulation, an advertising executive at the top of his career, only to have it revealed as fiction. Rick sits with Jerry. He explains, without cruelty, that it was a simulation. He tells him, gently enough, that Jerry can process it. For a man who spends most of his screen time treating Jerry's emotional states as inconveniences, Rick's handling of Jerry's post-simulation disorientation is notably considerate. It doesn't last. By the next episode, he's back to dismissing Jerry. The kindness is not a permanent recalibration, but in that specific moment, when Jerry was genuinely confused and hurting, Rick was present in a way that nobody asked him to be. Interdimensional Cable 2, Tempting Fate, Season 2, Episode 8, September 20th, 2015. Written by Dan Harmon, Tom Kaufman, and Ryan Ridley. Directed by Juan Meza Leon. The Smith family ends up in an intergalactic hospital while Jerry receives medical treatment. The episode is primarily a showcase for the interdimensional cable format, absurd clips from across the multiverse, but the circumstance that places them there is Jerry's health, and how the hospital handles it tells you something about the people in the room. During the episode, alien beings want to harvest a specific organ from Jerry, one that would save the life of their leader, a hugely influential figure called the Shrimply Pibbles. Jerry's agreement to the harvest is presented as a moral question. Would Jerry sacrifice a personal organ to save an alien leader's life? The organ in question is Jerry's penis. Rick's behavior through this episode is worth studying. He's dismissive for most of it. He watches the interdimensional TV, he makes jokes, he treats the whole situation with his usual contempt for Jerry's specific predicament. But there's a moment the show includes that's easy to miss on first viewing. When a hypothetical is shown on the interdimensional TV, a scenario where Jerry is shot multiple times, Rick gasps, visibly, audibly. It's involuntary. He reacts before he can manage his reaction. He's more invested than he lets himself admit. The episode ends with Jerry alive and intact. Shrimply Pibbles gets the
organ he needs from a volunteer. Jerry's sacrifice is ultimately not required, but throughout the episode, Rick stayed in the hospital. He didn't take Morty anywhere. He didn't use the waiting time for adventures. He sat in the hospital while Jerry's situation was uncertain. That's worth more than it sounds like. The Rick-Churian Morty Date, Season 3, Episode 10, October 1st, 2017, the Season 3 finale. Jerry and Beth reconcile in this episode. They decide to get back together, and Rick, who has spent the season leveraging Beth's preference for him over Jerry, suddenly has to reckon with what this means. In the climactic confrontation between Rick and Jerry, Rick admits, almost offhandedly, in a way the show treats as darkly comedic, that he had been considering killing Jerry, that he had run the calculation and found Jerry's existence to be, from a strategic standpoint, a problem. And then he tells Jerry that he chose not to. He didn't frame this as mercy exactly, but the reasoning matters. Rick concluded that Jerry's importance to Beth and to the kids outweighed his own personal contempt, that the family's well-being required Jerry to be alive and in it. He made that calculation and landed on keeping Jerry alive as the right answer. It's grim. It's a deeply Rick way of expressing care, but it is, at its core, Rick saying, "You matter to the people I love, therefore you are protected. Your survival is an investment in their happiness, and their happiness is something I choose." The post-credits scene of The ABCs of Beth, Season 3, Episode 9. This is the most quietly heroic Jerry moment in the entire series, and it arrives without preamble. Rick leaves a voicemail for Jerry, the man he ostensibly despises, the man he has just described in the same episode as his daughter's regrettable choice. The voicemail tells Jerry, in a voice of zero warmth but total practicality, that he took care of a situation involving Jerry's ex-girlfriend, Kira's ex-boyfriend, Trandor. Trandor had left Jerry a threatening message. Rick identified the threat, handled it, and called to let Jerry know. Jerry didn't ask for this. Morty didn't ask Rick to handle it. There is no evidence that anyone knew there was a problem to solve. Rick just found out, fixed it, and reported back. "I'm looking out for you," is essentially what he says, and then he hangs up. This is Rick Sanchez's heroism in its smallest and most concentrated form. A threat to someone he claims not to care about. A solution implemented without anyone asking. A voicemail left without waiting for gratitude. An act of protection so quiet that Jerry will probably never fully understand it. It is, considered carefully, one of the most revealing moments the show gives Rick. He didn't have to do this. He chose to. And the choice wasn't dramatic or complex. It was just, there's a threat, I'm removing it, and I'll let the person know they're safe. He looks out for Jerry. He'll never admit it, but he does. Star Mort, Rick Turn of the Jerry, Season 4, Episode 10. When Federation soldiers arrive at Dr. Wong's office, they find both Beth and Jerry. Rick races to Dr. Wong's office knowing Jerry is there. He doesn't leave Jerry as collateral or as a distraction. He gets both of them out. Later in the episode, Jerry, who has the family's invisibility belt, uses it to puppeteer Tammy's corpse, manipulating the body to distract Phoenix Person long enough for Space Beth to shut him down. Jerry's contribution saves Rick's life in this scene, but Rick saved Jerry first. When the Federation soldiers descended on the therapist's office, Rick ran toward the danger. He ran knowing Jerry was in there. The calculation that Jerry was worth running toward was made before Rick knew what the threat level was. Close Rick counters of the Rick kind, Season 1, Episode 10. When the Council of Ricks descends on the Smith household and freezes everyone, Rick's first negotiating demand, before he cooperates with anything, before he addresses his own situation, is that the Council release Jerry. He calls Jerry, "my daughter's idiot." The contempt is wrapped around the request, but the request is protective. He asks for Jerry's basic welfare before he asks for anything for himself. The Council agrees. Jerry is unfrozen. And then Rick deals with his own situation. Small, easy to miss, but in a moment of personal crisis, the first thing Rick advocated for was Jerry's comfort. The Jarek Trap, an informal name for the dynamic across the series, deserves one final note. Dan Harmon has talked in various interviews about the function Jerry serves in the show. Jerry is not just comic relief. He's a challenge to Rick's worldview. Rick believes that smallness, ordinary human limitation, the acceptance of a small life, is a kind of failure. Jerry is the fullest expression of that smallness. Jerry is content with things Rick finds contemptible, and the show argues, through Rick's repeated choices to protect Jerry, that whatever Rick believes about what Jerry represents, Rick's actual behavior around Jerry is not consistent with contempt. You don't leave voicemails for someone you genuinely don't care about. You don't take them to immortality field resorts when your grandson is worried they're suicidal. You don't choose not to kill them, specifically because they matter to the people you love. Rick keeps Jerry around. Season after season, he makes that choice. And the choice says something about Rick that his words never will. The Jerry section benefits from examining how the show builds the Rick-Jerry dynamic differently in each season. In season 1, Rick and Jerry are simply antagonistic. Rick holds Jerry in contempt. Jerry fears Rick. There's no complexity to it yet. It's a comedic relationship built on Jerry's inadequacy and Rick's disdain. In season 2, the dynamic begins to crack. Interdimensional Cable 2, Tempting Fate, puts the family in a waiting room together with Jerry's health at risk. Rick's behavior in this episode, the involuntary gasp when Jerry is shown being harmed, the continued engagement with the situation even when he could have left, begins to complicate the stated contempt. Look Who's Purging Now, Season 2, Episode 9, has a small Jerry beat. During the Purge Planet adventure, Rick and Morty leave Jerry behind, but the episode eventually wraps in a way that accounts for where Jerry is. Rick keeps track of where Jerry ended up. He doesn't lose Jerry in the chaos. He's irritated about it, but he doesn't let Jerry get lost. The keeping track of Jerry, the maintaining of awareness of where Jerry is across all the chaos of their lives, is its own quiet form of protection. Season 3's The Whirly-Durly Conspiracy, August 20th, 2017. This is the episode where Rick's relationship with Jerry gets its most complex treatment in the first 3 seasons. Rick takes Jerry to an amusement park known as the Whirly-Durly, an immortality resort where visitors cannot die while inside its boundaries. He takes Jerry there because Jerry is in a bad place. The divorce from Beth has broken something in Jerry. He's adrift. He's not okay. Rick, who has every reason to let Jerry continue to be broken, it serves his interests in the short term to have Jerry out of the family picture, takes him on an adventure. He takes the man he most frequently calls worthless to an immortality resort because the man needs something, and Rick is the one who has access to something that might help. The immortality resort becomes complicated. There's a conspiracy involving alien assassins who want to kill Rick, and Jerry gets caught up in it. During a particularly surreal moment, Rick and Jerry end up inside a wormhole where reality is distorted enough that they have an honest conversation. Rick tells Jerry something true. Not kind, not warm, but true. He admits that Jerry's love for Beth is real. He admits that this genuine love, this specific, unironic, undefended love that Jerry has for Beth is something Rick respects, even if you would never say it that way. Rick respects Jerry's love. He just doesn't know how to say so except in a wormhole where the physics of the moment make honesty unavoidable. At the end of the episode, Jerry has survived. He's shaken and troubled by what happened, the conspiracy, the assassins, the wormhole's reality distortions, but he's functional. He's slightly more okay than he was at the start. Rick didn't fix Jerry. He can't fix Jerry, but he took Jerry somewhere that let Jerry be okay for a day, and that was something. The Last Temptation of Jerry, Season 8, Episode 4, June 15th, 2025. This episode, in which Jerry is mistaken for something he isn't by a religious organization that has decided he's a divine figure, touches on Rick's complicated relationship with Jerry's fundamental ordinariness. The show uses Jerry's Easter Bunny confusion for comedic effect, but there's a thread in it that connects back to Rick. Rick ends up having to extricate Jerry from a situation where Jerry's guilelessness has gotten him treated as something he isn't. This is not new. Jerry frequently ends up in situations his straightforwardness creates, but what Rick does in this episode is quiet and worth noting. He doesn't exploit the situation for his own purposes. He could. The Easter Bunny confusion could serve Rick in various ways. Instead, he extracts Jerry and restores some semblance of normalcy. He protects Jerry's ability to be ordinary Jerry. He defends, however grudgingly, Jerry's right to be exactly who Jerry is without having to be what a religious cult decided he represents. There's a structural argument worth making about Jerry across the seasons. Jerry is the show's most obvious target. He's set up, in the early seasons especially, to be the person the audience is supposed to find contemptible or pitiable. He's insecure, he's ordinary. He lacks Rick's competence and Summer's edge, and Morty's moral clarity and Beth's strength. The show gradually undermines this framing. Jerry is, in many respects, doing better than most people in his situation would do. He loves his family, he's loyal, he's genuinely decent when decency is called for. He's not adapted for the Rick and Morty world, but that's not the same as being become worthless. Rick's arc with Jerry over 8 seasons mirrors this shift. He starts from contempt and gradually arrives at something like grudging respect, not for Jerry's competence, but for Jerry's persistence. Jerry keeps showing up. He keeps trying. He keeps loving Beth even when Beth makes it hard.
Rick, who has made a career of showing up in difficult circumstances and persisting through complicated love, who knows exactly what it costs to stay in a family that doesn't fully understand you, finds this in Jerry eventually. Not admirable exactly, not praiseworthy, but recognizable. He sees himself in Jerry in the specific way he least wants to acknowledge, as someone who loves people more than his self-image would allow him to admit. Here is the paradox at the heart of Rick's relationship with Jerry. Jerry is the person Rick most consistently treats as worthless. He is also the person Rick most consistently keeps alive, keeps protected, and keeps in the family. These two facts coexist in the same character across 8 seasons without resolving, and the tension between them is the show's most honest statement about how contempt and care can exist in the same relationship. Rick does not like Jerry. This is not a performance. Rick has genuine contempt for Jerry's intellectual limitations, his insecurity, his smallness of ambition. The contempt is real. Rick also cannot quite bring himself to let harm come to Jerry. The Jerry rescue missions, the voicemail, the whirly-durly adventure taken out of pity, the decision not to kill Jerry in the Rick, Chury, and Morty date, all of it accumulates into a portrait of someone who acts in spite of what he claims to believe. Dan Harmon has suggested in interviews that Rick's contempt for Jerry is, in part, displaced. What Rick actually can't stand about Jerry is what Jerry represents. The possibility that a small life, fully lived and genuinely loved, might be sufficient. That Jerry's love for Beth and his kids is not diminished by his ordinariness. That meaning doesn't require genius to be real. Rick has spent 40 years escaping the possibility that a small life could be enough. He destroyed his original small life rather than live it without Diane. He went enormous. Galactic scale, multiverse scale, maximum intelligence at maximum deployment. Partly to avoid ever having to reckon with the question of whether the small life he had before the bomb was actually the thing he most wanted. Jerry, by being happy in a small life, in a suburb, with an ordinary family, Jerry asks that question simply by existing. Rick can't stand that, and he can't let Jerry die. Both things are true. The Jerry section has a closing observation worth adding. Jerry, over the course of 8 seasons, does something that the show doesn't draw attention to, but that the structure of the narrative makes clear. He stays. Jerry stays in a family that contains Rick. He stays in a household that regularly experiences alien invasions, dimensional rifts, galactic political crises, and the general chaos of proximity to the universe's most dangerous genius. He stays after the divorce. He comes back. He keeps choosing Beth, even when Beth is complicated, even when Rick makes it harder, even when the whole situation is impossible. Rick and Jerry, in this light, are mirrors of each other. Both of them are choosing to stay in a family that is genuinely difficult to be part of. Both of them are doing it out of love that their personas don't make easy to express. Both of them are showing up, imperfectly, over and over, because the alternative is not being there. Rick's protection of Jerry is partly the protection of someone who is doing the same thing Rick is doing, staying in a hard thing because the people in it are worth staying for. Rick can't articulate this. The show doesn't ask him to, but the whirly-durly wormhole where Rick tells Jerry the truth instead of cruelty is the moment closest to Rick acknowledging it. Jerry's love is real. Rick sees it. He keeps Jerry alive. That's the closest Rick Sanchez gets to saying, I see you. I see what you're doing. I think it matters. Section 6. Every time Rick protected his family. There are moments in Rick and Morty where the threat isn't to one person. It's to everyone, the whole household, the whole planet, the whole dimension. And in those moments, the ones that scale beyond a single endangered family member, Rick's protective behavior becomes clearest because it's hardest to dismiss as incidental or self-serving. When Rick defends the entire Smith family from an existential threat, he can't claim he's doing it for practical reasons. He's not doing it because he needs Morty's brainwave pattern. He's not doing it because of guilt about Beth. He's doing it because they are his family and he cannot let something happen to them. The Season 2 finale, The Wedding Squanchers, October 4th, 2015. Written by Tom Kaufman, directed by Dominic Polcino. To understand this episode
episode fully, you need to know what precedes it. Season 2 has been a season of Rick being, on balance, what he always is. Sometimes helpful, sometimes disastrous, always present in the complicated way Rick is present. The family has reached a kind of uneasy accommodation with what Rick is. They've seen enough to understand they can't predict him and can't fully control him. At the end of season 2, Birdperson gets married. Rick brings the whole family to the wedding, an alien planet ceremony, full color and spectacle and genuine joy. In the lead up to the ceremony, Morty encourages Rick to be open to the experience, and Rick, in a moment of unusual softness, actually gives a toast. He speaks about love and hope and what he wishes for his best friend. He is, briefly and imperfectly, present in the way Beth has probably always wanted him to be. And then Tammy reveals she's a Galactic Federation agent. She kills Birdperson in the middle of the reception. The wedding becomes a massacre. Federation forces surround the building.
Rick gets his family out. He detonates his portal gun as a distraction, destroying it in the process, leaving himself without his primary means of dimensional travel, and the family flees on a spaceship. He finds a planet habitable enough for them. He keeps them safe in the immediate aftermath. A few days later, Rick overhears Jerry talking to the family. Jerry is suggesting they turn Rick in to the Federation, that their collective safety requires sacrificing Rick individually. The logic is cold and probably not wrong. Beth, Morty, and Summer all refuse. They say they'll keep running rather than hand Rick over. Rick hears all of this from outside. He hears his family choosing him at cost to themselves, and he calls the Galactic Federation. He turns himself in. While Hurt by Nine Inch Nails plays on the soundtrack, a song about damage and legacy and the question of whether love is real, Rick sits in a bar and waits for the Federation to come. He has a photograph of himself with Squanchy and Birdperson, his two closest friends. He sets it down. He waits. He is, in this moment, more alone than at any previous point in the show. One friend is dead. The other has fled. He is surrounded by aliens who don't know him. He is surrendering to people who will put him in the worst prison they have. And his family gets to go home. The Galactic Federation occupies Earth in the wake of his surrender, so it's not a clean solution. The occupation brings its own problems, but the family is alive. They're together. They're on Earth. Rick's decision is the reason for that. He surrendered. Rick Sanchez, the man who has never lost, who has killed every Rick sent to stop him, who has collapsed civilizations and outthought entire bureaucratic systems, surrendered to a security force he could have evaded because the alternative was his family on the run forever.
The show's writers have cited this moment repeatedly as the clearest expression of Rick's actual priorities. He can pretend nothing matters. He cannot pretend his family's safety doesn't matter. When pushed to the absolute limit of the choice, he chooses them. The Rickshank Rickdemption, Season 3, Episode 1, April 1st, 2017, written by Mike McMahon, directed by Erica Hayes. The complement to the surrender in the Wedding Squanchers is the escape from the Rickshank Rickdemption. If the Season 2 finale shows Rick giving up his freedom for his family, the Season 3 premiere shows Rick dismantling the entire system that threatened them. After his surrender, Rick spends time in Galactic Federation prison being interrogated by an agent named Cornelius Daniel. Daniel wants the formula for interdimensional travel. Rick lets Daniel connect via Neuralink to his memories, apparently cooperating. He gives Daniel access to what appears to be his origin story. A memory of young Beth, a memory of Diane, a memory of Rick Prime's visit and the subsequent bomb. Rick allows Daniel to follow him through this emotional core. And then, at the precise moment Daniel's guard is down, at the moment Daniel believes he's almost succeeded, Rick hijacks the Neuralink. He transfers his consciousness into Daniel's body. He begins the actual plan. The plan has multiple simultaneous objectives: extract himself from prison, destroy the Citadel's Council of Ricks, collapse the Galactic Federation's economy, and get Morty and Summer to safety. He executes all of these in sequence, using each as cover for the next, appearing to be something different to each organization he passes through. The Federation falls. Earth is freed. The Citadel's Council is destroyed. Rick comes home. There's a dimension to this worth sitting with. Rick could have simply escaped. His intelligence and his implanted memories are more than sufficient to break out of prison without additional objectives. But he doesn't just escape. He tears down the entire infrastructure that threatened his family. He removes the threat at its root. The Galactic Federation that occupied Earth, the Council of Ricks that would have exploited the situation, all of it gone because Rick decided that escape alone wasn't sufficient. He does this for his family, who had no idea it was happening while it was happening. They find out afterward when Rick walks back through the door. The scale of what Rick executed while they were going about their occupied lives, entirely invisible to them, is something they will probably never fully appreciate. Rick doesn't need them to. That's the point. Total Rick-All, Season 2, Episode 4, August 16th, 2015. Written by Mike McMahon, directed by Juan Meza Leon. When alien parasites infiltrate the Smith household and begin multiplying by implanting false memories, the family is in genuine danger. The parasites can't be killed with conventional weapons. They need to be identified first, which requires finding a negative memory with the suspected parasite. Real relationships have bad memories. The parasites only create false positive ones. Rick figures this out. He immediately locks down the house. Quarantine protocol. He prevents anyone from leaving, which seems authoritarian and unkind, but the logic is correct. The parasites spread through contact, and containment is the only viable strategy. He then arms himself and methodically goes through the house. He identifies parasites. He shoots them. He does this while under attack from creatures wearing the faces of people the family cares about, beloved figures, friendly memories, all of them potential parasites. Rick shoots them all. He maintains this through the entire episode, through the escalation, through the multiplication, through the moment when it becomes clear that the number of parasites is almost overwhelming. He holds the household. When Mr. Poopy Butthole is shot by Beth, an error as it turns out, Rick immediately rushes to him. The episode's post-credit scene confirms that Mr. Poopy Butthole survives and recovers over time. But in the moment Rick thought a real friend might be dying inside his quarantine, he moved fast to get him care. The episode frames all of this as comedy. The parasites keep multiplying into increasingly absurd, beloved figures. The situation escalates beyond any reasonable point, but the structure underneath the comedy is Rick doing exactly what the family needs him to do, taking charge of a chaotic threat, making difficult decisions, absorbing the ugliness of the situation so the family doesn't have to face it without support. Get Schwifty, Season 2, Episode 5, August 23rd, 2015. Written by Tom Kaufman. Directed by Dominic Polcino. Giant alien beings called Cromulons descend on Earth. They force the planet to participate in an intergalactic music competition called Planet Music. If Earth can't produce a competitive musical performance, it will be destroyed. Rick's immediate response is to write a song. He and Morty produce Get Schwifty in approximately 40 seconds and perform it to keep Earth alive in the competition. The song is absurd. It is, by design, one of the most ridiculous things in the show's history. But the structure of what Rick does is, cosmic threat appears, family is endangered, Rick finds a solution. He works at speed because speed is what the situation requires. He puts himself in the satellite, broadcasts from space, operates in a position where one mistake means Earth is destroyed. He performs an embarrassing song in front of an alien audience that has enslaved his planet. He does all of this without being asked, without a plan, with nothing but quick improvisation and the certainty that he is not going to let Earth be destroyed while his family is on it. Later in the episode, Ice-T, a subplot involving the literal rapper Ice-T being an alien who abandoned his people, joins Rick in the satellite. Ice-T's arc in this episode mirrors Rick's. Both are beings who have tried to separate themselves from the emotional bonds of family and community, and both are forced by circumstances to acknowledge that those bonds matter. Ice-T ultimately returns to his people. Rick, implicitly, is doing the same thing. He's performing for Earth because Earth is where his people are. Unmortrican, Season 7, Episode 5, November 12th, 2023. Written by Jeff Loveness, directed by Nicholas Toney. This is the episode where Rick kills Rick Prime. The confrontation with Rick Prime, the Rick who murdered Diane and Beth, who has been the show's ultimate antagonist since Season 5's backstory reveal, has been building for 2 seasons. When it finally happens, it happens alongside Evil Morty, who has his own reasons for wanting Rick Prime neutralized. Rick and Evil Morty work together to corner Rick Prime. The confrontation, when it arrives, is not clean. Rick Prime is the most dangerous version of Rick that exists, more nihilistic, more weaponized, more willing to do anything. The fight is brutal and costly, and when Rick finally kills him, it doesn't feel triumphant. It feels like the end of something. Rick beats Rick Prime to death with his fists, partly. The show is deliberate about making this tactile and exhausting. This is not a spectacular
spectacular finish. It's a hard, grinding act of violence committed by someone who has been pointing at this moment for decades. But what is it for? On one level, it's personal. Rick Prime killed Diane. Rick Prime killed the original Beth. This is the act of revenge Rick C137 has been pursuing since before the show began. But on another level, Rick Prime was an ongoing threat to everyone Rick cares about. He had the power and the willingness to harm any version of Rick's family. As long as Rick Prime was alive, that threat existed. Rick's family was never fully safe. Killing Rick Prime is, functionally, one of the most complete protective acts Rick has ever performed. He removed from existence the entity most capable of harming the people he loves. Evil Morty also destroys all of Rick Prime's backups in this episode, all the stored copies of Rick Prime's consciousness that would have allowed him to survive. This is Evil Morty's contribution, and Rick allows it, even knowing it means the most complete possible elimination. No resurrection, no return. It's done. Rick sat with the body afterward. The show gave him that moment, sitting with the corpse of the person he'd spent decades chasing. He looked at him. He didn't celebrate. He just sat there. That sitting is the show acknowledging what it cost.
Rick got what he wanted, and what he wanted was to protect everyone else from what had been done to him. Night Family, Season 6, Episode 4, September 25th, 2022. Written by Cody Ziegler, directed by Lucas Gray. Rick invents Night Patrol, a technology that controls sleepwalking behavior to make the sleeping body useful. He starts using it on himself. The rest of the family finds out and wants to participate. The Night Family, the sleeping selves of the Smith family, eventually develop their own agenda. They begin to take over. The dynamics of Day Family versus Night Family become a genuine conflict. Rick's role in resolving this is protective in a specific way. He has to protect the family from a version of themselves. The Night Family isn't an external threat, it's internal, a product of a technology Rick introduced. When it goes wrong, Rick is the one who has to fix it, because Rick is the one who brought it into the household. This is a pattern worth naming. Rick introduces things into the Smith household that create danger, and Rick is the one who resolves that danger when it becomes critical. He's the source of much of the household's chaos, and he's also consistently the one who manages it when it exceeds what the family can handle alone. The pattern of Rick as the household's first and last line of defense runs through the entire series. He quarantines the house when parasites invade. He destroys the Galactic Federation when they occupy Earth. He kills the person who killed his wife and daughter, removing that threat from his family's universe permanently. He collapses systems, eliminates enemies, burns down structures that threaten the people he lives with. He does this without being thanked, usually. He does this without being asked, in many cases. He does this because the family is his, whatever his claims about not caring, and he is constitutionally unable to sit still while something threatens what is his. That inability, the way Rick's protective instinct overrides his stated philosophy every single time, is one of the show's most consistent and honest things about him. The family protection section benefits from examining a few more episodes where Rick's actions are organized around protecting the entire Smith household rather than specific individuals. Anatomy Park, Season 1, Episode 3, December 16th, 2013. Written by Eric Acosta and Wade Randolph. Directed by John Rice. This early episode primarily concerns Rick and Morty being miniaturized inside a dying man named Reuben to create an anatomy-themed park. But the Smith household B-plot is worth noting. While Rick and Morty are inside Reuben, the family has Christmas plans. The day is supposed to be a family gathering. Rick's adventure disrupts this, as Rick's adventures perpetually disrupt family events. But at the episode's end, Rick comes back. He comes back for Christmas. The adventure concludes. Rick chooses to be present for the family gathering rather than disappearing after the immediate crisis. He shows up for Christmas. This may seem like the bare minimum, and it is, but across the show's run, there are episodes where Rick disappears after the adventure rather than returning to the family context. The ones where he comes back to ordinary family life are, in their own small way, choices. Ricksy Business, Season 1, Episode 11, April 14th, 2014. Rick throws a party while Beth and Jerry are away. The party gets out of hand. Birdperson arrives, aliens arrive, things become chaotic. By the episode's end, the house is a disaster. Rick freezes time and cleans up the house before Beth and Jerry return. He froze time to clean the house so that Beth and Jerry would come home to a normal household. This is an enormous act of effort deployed in service of something very small and very domestic. Rick has the ability to freeze time. He uses this power to protect his daughter's home from evidence of what he's done in her absence. The scale of what he used versus what he used it for is the joke, but the underlying behavior, Rick cleaning up after himself so Beth doesn't have to deal with the consequences, is care. Night Shriekers / The Night Family, Season 6, Episode 4, September 25th, 2022. Rick installs a sleep training device that programs the household to exercise and do chores while they sleep. When this gets out of hand, when the Night Family, as the family calls their sleeping selves, starts making demands and building a kind of secondary consciousness, Rick has to deal with the consequences of his own creation. The episode is primarily about Rick confronting a problem he caused and choosing to fix it rather than exit. He could leave. He could portal out and let the family deal with the Night Family situation. He stays and resolves it. This is Rick taking responsibility for his own disruptions to the household. Not perfectly, not without chaos, but taking responsibility. By season 6, this is more common. Rick's willingness to stay and clean up what he creates has increased across the series. The early seasons Rick would have ported out. Later Rick stays. Final Desmithation, Season 6, Episode 5, October 2nd, 2022. This episode involves Jerry receiving fortune cookies that come true. Rick becomes involved because the situation escalates into something dangerous, not just for Jerry, but for reality itself in the immediate vicinity. Rick deals with it. He doesn't have to. The fortune cookie crisis is Jerry's crisis, tangentially related to Rick. But Rick steps in because the situation is beyond Jerry's ability to handle, and beyond everyone else's ability to handle. And Rick is the one who can actually manage it. He manages it with his characteristic blend of competence and contempt, but he manages it. The family stays safe. The Galactic Federation's occupation of Earth, which follows Rick's arrest in The Wedding Squanchers and lasts through the Rick Shank Rickdemption, is worth examining for what it says about Rick's protection of the family at scale. When the Federation occupies Earth, the family's situation changes dramatically. Beth loses her job. Jerry, inexplicably, thrives in the Federation's bureaucratic structure. The family has to navigate occupation. Rick, while imprisoned, is apparently not planning for a quick escape. He waits. He runs his plan. The long, elaborate plan involving Cornelius Daniel and the Citadel and the Federation's economic infrastructure carefully and at the right moment. He doesn't rush because rushing would mean rescuing only himself. He waits until the plan is complete enough that when he acts, he frees Earth, defeats the Citadel's council, and returns to the family simultaneously. He could have escaped Federation prison in weeks, probably. The plan he ran took longer. He ran the longer plan because it produced a more complete protection of the people he cared about. Season 7's Unmortrican, November 12th, 2023, belongs in the family protection section as much as anywhere. When Rick finally kills Rick Prime, the Rick who killed Diane in the original Beth, it is, in one reading, an act of vengeance and personal resolution. Rick Prime is dead. Rick C-137's 4-decade obsession has an ending, but in another reading, it's an act of protection for the family. Rick Prime is a specific existential threat. He is the Rick who murdered Rick's original family and has spent decades demonstrating contempt for family as a concept. His continued existence is a standing threat to everyone Rick cares about. Rick Prime is, eventually, also destroyed by evil Morty through the Omega device, which removes Diane from all of reality, including from Rick's memories. This is its own kind of loss, one that Rick didn't choose and couldn't prevent, but the act of confronting Rick Prime, of finally closing that chapter, removes from the universe the single entity most dangerous to everything Rick has built. That's family protection at the most fundamental level. Remove the thing that could destroy everything. Valkyric, Season 8, Episode 2, June 1st, 2025. Space Beth calls Rick. She's trapped. She's in the middle of a Federation investigation that's gone wrong. She needs extraction. Rick is in his sub-basement sushi restaurant when she calls. He's relaxed. He's eating. He could make her wait. He could send someone else. He goes immediately. The episode's reviews noted this: Rick's willingness to drop everything and go when Beth calls. Space Beth, the daughter he chose not to identify as original or clone, is presented as unremarkable by Rick, as obvious. Of course he goes. She called. He tells the Federation soldiers, who are initially hostile to him, that Space Beth is just just as dangerous as he is. He vouches for her in the middle of a military confrontation. He fights alongside her through the entire episode. By the episode's end, the reviews observe that Space Beth and Rick seem to have built something in this adventure. The relationship between them, which has always been complicated by the clone ambiguity, is slightly more solid after spending an episode fighting together. Rick showed up. He fought beside her. He vouched for her when vouching cost something. The family is defended. The show makes a specific argument about the Smith family that's worth stating explicitly in the protection section.
Rick didn't grow up with his family. He chose them. He wandered into a dimension where a Beth existed and a family had been built around her, and he decided to insert himself into it and stay. This was a choice made by a man with the ability to go anywhere and do anything, and he chose the suburban family in the suburban house with the ordinary problems. This matters because it means every act of protection Rick extends to the family is an act of protecting something he chose to have. He can't claim he's obligated by biology or tradition or social expectation. He has no obligations here that he didn't create himself by staying. Every morning in the garage is a choice. Every dinner, every adventure that starts because Morty is there and Rick wants to take him. Every intervention on Jerry's behalf. Every time he shows up to Christmas instead of disappearing into the multiverse. He chose all of it. He keeps choosing it. This is the show's argument about what family actually is. Not the thing you were born into, but the thing you keep choosing. Rick, who has the most ability of anyone in the show to unchoose the family, keeps choosing it. Season after season, episode after episode, right up through the season 8 finale, where he's sitting in a sub-basement with his daughter, choosing to be present for the grief rather than portaling somewhere easier. The family is a choice Rick keeps making. That choice is its own kind of heroism. The heroism of commitment, of staying, of saying through action what he would never say in words. These people are mine. I'm not going anywhere. One detail about the wedding squanchers and its aftermath that often gets overlooked in discussions of Rick's sacrifice. When Rick turns himself in, he knows the Federation is going to occupy Earth. He's calculated this. The Federation doesn't simply go away because Rick is captured. Their political and military infrastructure is still operational, and they use Rick's surrender as an opportunity to extend their reach to a planet they now have leverage over. Rick's surrender bought the family their physical safety and their access to their home. It did not buy them a comfortable, occupation-free life. The Season 3 premiere, The Rick Shank Rickdemption, opens with the family navigating a galactic Federation-occupied Earth, alien checkpoints, currency conversion, Beth losing her job because alien technology made horse surgery obsolete. Rick knew this would happen. He ran the calculation. He decided the family dealing with a bad occupation is better than the family on the run forever. He absorbed the guilt of having brought the Federation to Earth as one more cost of his presence in their lives. And then, from prison, he fixed it. He dismantled the Federation's economic infrastructure in the same sequence that freed him and Earth and removed the Council of Ricks. He couldn't fix it before surrendering. The plan required the position of being a prisoner to execute, but he fixed it as soon as fixing it was possible. He surrendered, knowing he'd caused a problem for everyone he loved, and he planned the repair before the surrender was complete. The surrender and the repair were conceived together. He held both in his head simultaneously, the sacrifice and the way to undo the damage the sacrifice caused. That's a level of planning and commitment that the show doesn't always draw attention to, because the show is usually focused on the moment rather than the architecture, but the architecture is there. Rick doesn't just sacrifice, he plans the path back from the sacrifice. He tends to the consequences. He accounts for what the protection costs and then looks for ways to reduce that cost. He is, underneath everything, someone who thinks about what it means to take care of people, who does the full calculation, including the second and third order effects, who doesn't settle for the sacrifice but keeps working until the situation is as repaired as it can be. That's what it looks like to take responsibility for the people you love, even when you're doing it from a Galactic Federation maximum security facility. Even then. Section 7. Birdperson, Squanchy, and Rick's friends. The show has been careful, across its run, to establish that Rick's difficulty with emotional attachment is not universal. He struggles with his family. He fights it. He deflects and jokes and runs. But with his oldest friends, with Birdperson and Squanchy, the companion
companions from the Resistance years, something different is visible. The armor doesn't quite hold. This is important because it tells us something about when Rick's protective capacity was formed, before the nihilism, before the years of failed revenge, before the drinking became a personality trait. There was a younger Rick who had people he loved without complication, who fought alongside them, who built a life of meaning inside the Resistance against the Galactic Federation. Those bonds predate the coping mechanisms. They're built into Rick at a level that the cynicism can't fully reach. Birdperson first appears in Rixie Business, the Season 1 finale, April 14th, 2014. Written by Ryan Ridley and Tom Kaufman, directed by Brian Newton. He arrives at the party Rick throws while Beth and Jerry are away. He's quiet, serious. He watches Rick and Morty interact and offers Morty one of the show's most important early pieces of information, that wubba-lubba-dub-dub means I am in great pain, please help me. That Rick is always, in his way, saying that. Birdperson doesn't elaborate. He doesn't need to. He's saying, I know this person. I know what's underneath. I've been his friend through enough that I understand what he is. The fact that Birdperson attends Rick's party at all, that he's someone Rick calls when he wants to celebrate, someone whose presence Rick finds worth having, establishes something. Rick has at least one friend he trusts with the version of himself he's not performing for anyone. The Wedding Squanchers, Season 2, Episode 10. The wedding of Birdperson and Tammy is the culmination of a relationship the show has been quietly building since the Season 1 finale. Rick is there. He's in the wedding party. He gives a toast. The toast is worth discussing. Rick gives it partially because he's pushed into it, and partly because he actually wants to. He talks about love and hope and what he wishes for his friend. It's awkward. It's not the eloquent speech of a man who does this easily, but it's genuine. Rick is trying for Birdperson to be present in the way that the moment requires. And then Tammy kills Birdperson. Rick's response to Birdperson's death is not visible to the audience immediately. The episode is chaos. The massacre, the escape, the Federation surrounding the building. There's no moment for grief. Rick is in survival mode, getting the family out, but the image the episode ends on, before Rick surrenders, is Rick in a bar with the photograph of himself, Birdperson, and Squanchy, his three closest friends. Two of them now effectively gone. He sets the photograph down. He waits. The grief in that moment is real. The show doesn't perform it. It just puts Rick in that bar with that photograph. Rickternal Friendshine of the Spotless Mort, Season 5, Episode 8, August 8th, 2021. Written by James Siciliano, directed by Antoine Demouy. This is the episode where Rick spends what appears to be years inside Birdperson's mind trying to rebuild him. Birdperson, or rather, what's left of him, has been converted into Phoenix Person by the Galactic Federation, a weaponized cyborg version of himself. Rick has spent time, quietly and alone, trying to reconstruct his best friend. When the episode begins, he has a way in, a device that lets him enter Birdperson's memory space. Inside, he finds the memories in chaos. The Galactic Federation's conversion process has shattered things. Rick has to navigate Birdperson's internal landscape and help him rebuild something from the wreckage. What Rick finds inside is complicated. He finds memories of the Resistance, of the time he and Birdperson and Squanchy spent fighting together, building something. He finds memories of Tammy, who Birdperson loved. He finds the memory of a daughter, Birdperson's daughter with Tammy, a child the show hadn't previously revealed. Rick is alone with all of this. It's just him in the memory space. And the choice he faces, whether to tell Birdperson about his daughter, is one he makes without witnesses. He considers not telling him. He considers it genuinely. Birdperson knowing about his daughter means complications, danger, pain. It would be easier to restore a Birdperson who doesn't know. He tells him anyway. He tells him because he can't look at a father who doesn't know his child exists and choose to keep that from him. He tells him because of what he knows about what it means to lose a daughter. He tells him because the alternative, keeping that secret to make his own life simpler, would mean Rick choosing his comfort over Birdperson's right to be a father. Rick worked through years of Birdperson's shattered memory space. He rebuilt his friend from the inside out. He told him the hardest truth when he could have buried it. He gave back as much as he could what the Galactic Federation took. This is perhaps the most sustained act of care Rick performs for anyone in the series. Not a moment of sacrifice, a sustained, deliberate, labor-intensive act of friendship. Months in a garage building Phoenix Person's reconstruction. Years inside a memory space space, navigating the damage. All of it alone. All of it because Rick could not accept that Birdperson was simply gone. Squanchy, the third member of the original trio, appears more briefly in the show's run, but his presence in the key episodes matters. In The Wedding Squanchers, Squanchy fights the Federation forces to create cover for Rick's family to escape. He transforms, a previously unknown ability involving some kind of stimulant Squanchy takes, into a larger, more powerful form. He buys the family time. His fate is ambiguous after the wedding. The show doesn't confirm his death, but his next appearance doesn't happen for several seasons. Rick adds him to the mental ledger of people the events of that night cost. The three of them, Rick, Birdperson, Squanchy, are a specific kind of friendship. People who built something together under pressure, who fought alongside each other, who know versions of each other that no one else knows. The loss of that friendship, scattered by the Federation's betrayal at the wedding, is one of the show's genuine emotional costs. And Rick's sustained effort to bring Birdperson back, years of work done alone, is the show's most direct statement that Rick does not let go of the people who matter to him. He is loyal in ways he refuses to describe as loyalty. The Resistance years, glimpsed in backstory across multiple seasons, deserve a moment of attention. Rick was part of a resistance movement against the Galactic Federation long before the show begins. He fought alongside Birdperson and Squanchy. There was an ideological commitment there, a belief that the Federation's power should be opposed, that freedom and autonomy mattered enough to risk life for. The nihilism Rick performs throughout the show is, in part, what happened to that idealism. The Resistance failed. The Federation remained. Birdperson was captured and converted. Squanchy scattered. Rick's cause became a decade-long, solo pursuit of revenge. The meaning structure he'd built, fighting for something, with people he loved, collapsed. What he built in its place was the armor, the jokes, the drinking, the persona. But underneath, the idealism never entirely went away. Rick still acts on behalf of the people he cares about. He still fights for what matters. He just refuses to call it fighting for what matters. He refuses to give it the name it deserves. The friends who knew him before the armor, who know the Rick that existed when there was still a cause worth naming, are the people who see through the persona most clearly. Birdperson told Morty the truth about Wubba Lubba Dub Dub. Birdperson knows Rick is asking for help. The protection Rick extends to his friends is its own form of that asking. He keeps them alive. He rebuilds them from the inside. He refuses to let the loss be final. He asks, in the only language he has, action, effort, the refusal to give up for them to still exist. The friendship section needs more texture. The relationships with Birdperson and Squanchy are the show's evidence that Rick was once a person who loved people without armor, and they deserve more space. Before the Resistance, before the Federation, before the decades of failed revenge, Rick was a man who chose his friends. The choice was active. Birdperson and Squanchy didn't stumble into Rick's orbit by accident. Rick found people who matched what he needed, and he held on to them. He built a life around that friendship the same way most people build a life around family. When that life was destroyed at the wedding by the Federation's betrayal, Rick lost the last version of his world that contained people who knew the pre-armor Rick. Not Beth's Rick, not Morty's Rick, the Rick who was young and angry and idealistic enough to join a resistance and fight for something. The grief of losing Birdperson, specifically the grief of losing access to the person who knew that earlier self, is one of the show's longest-running emotional undercurrents. Rick spent months rebuilding Birdperson from spare parts, not because he needed Birdperson for anything practical, because he needed Birdperson to exist. Rickternal Friendshine of the Spotless Mort, Season 5, Episode 8. The process of what Rick actually did inside Birdperson's memory space deserves closer attention. The memory space is a chaotic landscape. The Federation's conversion process that created Phoenix Person shattered Birdperson's interior world. What Rick finds when he enters is not a coherent set of memories, but wreckage, fragments of the Resistance years, corrupted emotional data, the detritus of what was done to his friend. Rick has to navigate this alone. No guide, no map. He has his own memories of Birdperson as reference points, the things they shared, the events they were both present for, and he uses them to find the coherent pieces of Birdperson inside the damage. This is delicate work. Rick is usually defined by his ability to apply brute force, intelligence deployed as a weapon, solving problems through
overwhelming capacity. Inside Birdperson's mind, brute force doesn't work. He has to be careful. He has to handle his friend's memories with attention. There's something in that image, Rick moving carefully through the ruined interior of his friend's mind, trying not to damage anything further, that runs against everything Rick performs as his persona. He's gentle in there. He has to be. The squanchy dimension of this friendship doesn't get enough attention. Squanchy is, in many ways, the most eccentric of the trio. He speaks in a language that sounds like nonsense, but apparently has meaning. His squanch phrasings that function as a complete idiom. He's small and strange and instantly recognizable as someone who fits alongside Rick and Birdperson, specifically because the three of them together suggest a history of finding each other. Squanchy's transformation in The Wedding Squanchers, when he takes a vial of something that dramatically alters his size and combat capability, is the show's clearest statement about what he was willing to do for the group. He didn't have to fight. He could have run with everyone else. He chose to fight to give Rick's family time to escape. He fought a Federation army to give Morty and Summer and Beth and Jerry a few extra minutes. The three of them, Rick, Birdperson, Squanchy, had an established dynamic. In crisis, they covered each other. That instinct was alive in Squanchy at the wedding, even though the instinct was costly. Rick carries this. He carries what Squanchy did. He doesn't get to thank him. He doesn't know for certain what happened after. He just knows Squanchy chose to fight when he didn't have to, and Rick got to live with the consequence of that choice. The resistance years that formed this friendship are sketched across the show in fragments, but enough emerges to understand what it was. The Rick and Morty world has established, through Season 2 and subsequent seasons, that the Galactic Federation is an empire with genuine moral problems. It assimilates planets. It places species under its governance whether or not those species consent. It treats the beings under its control as resources. Rick, before the show begins, was part of the resistance against this. The resistance movement, which included Birdperson and Squanchy, was fighting for something real. They were fighting for freedom and self-determination and the right of beings to exist outside the Federation's control. This is important context for Rick's nihilism. The nihilism came after. It came after the resistance failed to change much, after Birdperson was captured, after the Federation continued to exist, after decades of solo revenge seeking produced nothing. The nihilism is not Rick's original position. It's what happens to idealism that runs out of wins. And underneath the nihilism, the idealism is still there. When Rick collapses the Federation's economy in Season 3, he doesn't do it for himself. He does it because a world without the Federation is one his family and his friends are safer in. The underlying commitment to freedom and against unjust power never entirely left. It was formed in friendship. It lives in friendship. The Birdperson relationship is, in part, the last link between current Rick and the person he was when he believed in things he would now refuse to name. Valkyric, Season 8, Episode 2, touches on this when Rick is asked to help Spacebeth investigate the Galactic Defiance, the successor resistance group that Spacebeth works with. Rick's engagement with this isn't cynical. He shows up. He fights. The Galactic Defiance is, structurally, a successor to the resistance movement Rick was part of decades ago, working alongside Spacebeth on a mission that involves opposing Federation-adjacent power structures. Is Rick being connected, however indirectly, to the thing he was doing when he had Birdperson and Squanchy beside him? He doesn't say this. He wouldn't. But the ease with which he slots into the mission, the way it doesn't require explanation or justification, suggests it's familiar. He's done this with different people in different circumstances at a different age. He's still doing it. There's a detail about Rick's relationship with Birdperson that the show surfaces in Rickternal Friendshine that deserves more attention. Inside Birdperson's memory space, Rick finds memories of the resistance years. He finds himself there, a younger Rick, still idealistic enough to be fighting for something, still the person who believed the fight was worth having. These are Rick's memories too, in a sense. He shared these experiences with Birdperson. They're not just Birdperson's past, they're the version of Rick's past that was witnessed by someone who knew him then. When Rick navigates these memories to help restore Birdperson, he is also unavoidably walking through his own history, through the period before the armor, through who he was when he had something to fight for that wasn't just revenge. The restoration of Birdperson is, in this reading, also a restoration of Rick's access to his own better past. Not perfectly. The memories belong to Birdperson, and Rick can't keep them, but in the process of rebuilding
rebuilding his friend, Rick spends time in the version of history where he was someone worth being. That's not nothing. For a man who has been grieving his past self as much as his lost family, for a man who lost not just Diane and Beth, but his own former idealism, getting to walk through those memories is a kind of gift. He gives Birdperson his life back. Birdperson inadvertently gives Rick a few hours with the person he used to be. Rick's protection of Birdperson extends forward in time in a way the show handles carefully. After Birdperson is restored, the relationship between the two of them has to be rebuilt. Birdperson is not simply the person he was before. The conversion process, while reversed, left marks. He has a daughter he's never met, a grief for Tammy that is complicated by what Tammy did to him and to Rick. He has to rebuild his sense of himself in a world that has moved on from the one he remembers. Rick is present for this, not in every moment. The show doesn't have the screen time to document every conversation, but the implication across subsequent seasons is that Rick and Birdperson are working on being friends again, working through what happened, rebuilding the relationship that the Federation tried to destroy. This is Rick doing the maintenance work of friendship, the less dramatic, less cinematic work of simply continuing to be present for someone who has been through something terrible. The restoration of Birdperson was the dramatic moment. The after is the quiet commitment. There is a dimension of Rick's relationship with Birdperson that involves what Birdperson represents for Rick's self-understanding. Birdperson, as established in the show's backstory, fought alongside Rick during a period when Rick believed in fighting for things. When Rick was someone whose values could be named, and whose commitments were visible, and whose intelligence was deployed toward ends he could describe. By the time the show begins, Rick is none of those things. His intelligence is deployed variously, sometimes for protection, sometimes for entertainment, sometimes for revenge. His values are hidden behind nihilism. His commitments are performed as non-existence. Birdperson knew the other version, the version that believed. And when Rick is with Birdperson, the other version is not entirely absent. The man Birdperson knew is still in there, somewhere under 8 seasons of armor, and Birdperson's presence is one of the few things in the show that makes that other Rick briefly visible. This is why Birdperson's restoration matters beyond the friendship. It restores Rick's access to a witness for who he was before grief organized everything. The most intelligent being in the multiverse cannot remember his own best self clearly. Birdperson can remember it for him. Squanchy's sacrifice at the wedding deserves its own careful treatment. Squanchy transforms, drinks a vial from his own body, triggers whatever biological process makes him become something larger and more capable in the middle of the Federation's attack on the wedding reception. He is doing this not because he has to, not because there is no other option for him personally. He could run. The exit is available. He doesn't run. He buys time. He fights. He creates the window through which Rick's family escapes. He takes the consequence of being the one who stays behind so others can go. Rick cannot thank him. Rick doesn't know what happened after. Squanchy's fate is left ambiguous for seasons. The show doesn't resolve whether he survived the transformation's aftermath in the Federation's response, but Rick carries it. It's part of the calculation of what the wedding cost. Birdperson dead, Squanchy's fate uncertain, Rick captured. The whole architecture of his external life dismantled in a single evening. When Rick sits in that bar with the photograph, the image of himself and Birdperson and Squanchy from better years, he is holding the memory of people who were willing to give things up for him and for the people he loved. That specific photograph at the end of The Wedding Squanchers is the show's most direct statement about what Rick was about to lose when he called the Federation. He was losing access to the last people who knew who he was. He called anyway, because the family had to go home. The Resistance years backdrop to the Rick, Birdperson, Squanchy friendship has thematic significance for the show's argument about heroism. The show's position on heroism, developed across 8 seasons, is that heroism is not primarily a quality of the person, but a quality of the choice. Rick is not a hero by nature. Rick C-137 is not better built for heroism than most Ricks. What distinguishes him from the Council of Ricks, from Rick Prime, from the average Citadel Rick, is not superior virtue or superior design. It is specific choices made in specific moments for specific people under circumstances where other choices were available. The Resistance in this light was a period when Rick regularly made choices of that quality, when the people around him were also making those choices, when the friendship
friendship that formed from that shared choosing became the deepest friendship of Rick's life. The nihilism he developed afterward is not a rejection of what the resistance stood for. It's grief for the period when he had people worth fighting alongside. The nihilism is what happens when you've lost the war and lost the people and have to keep living in the rubble of what you believed in. Rick keeps fighting. He just can't admit anymore that that's what it is. Section 8. Rick's greatest sacrifices. The word sacrifice is tricky when applied to Rick Sanchez,
because Rick almost never frames what he does as sacrifice. He doesn't accept the word. He doesn't dwell on what things cost him. He does the thing and moves on, and gets angry when anyone tries to make it meaningful. He has a deep allergy to being perceived as someone who gives things up for other people. But the things he gives up are real, and the list of them, accumulated across 8 seasons, is longer and heavier than his persona would suggest. The Caller in the Void. A Wrinkle in Time. Season 2, Episode 1. The collar moment is discussed in the Morty section, but it belongs here too. Rick gives Morty his only means of surviving the quantum void. He does it believing that he is going to dissolve. He says, "Be good, Morty. Be better than me." And he means it. He is, in that moment, truly okay with not surviving. He doesn't survive because he dies. He survives because a second caller happens to drift by. But the sacrifice was made with full information, or at least with the information available. He didn't know the second caller was there. He gave his caller to Morty. The sacrifice wasn't taken away when the second caller appeared. It was made. The choice was made. Rick accepted the dissolution of himself to save his grandson. That is the simplest form of what heroism costs, stripped of all the posturing. The Surrender. The Wedding Squanchers. Season 2, Episode 10. When Rick turns himself into the Galactic Federation, he gives up freedom, real freedom. The portal gun already destroyed, the ability to run already gone. The only remaining option being to surrender to an organization that will put him in maximum security and never let him out. He does it because his family chose him, and he decided that choice shouldn't cost them their lives. The math of the moment is this: the family will keep running, keep risking their lives, rather than turn Rick over. Rick looks at that math and decides, I will solve this problem by removing myself from it. He turns himself in so that the family doesn't have to live on the run because of him. The Federation does occupy Earth after Rick's arrest. The situation isn't clean, but the family is on Earth. They're together. They're not running. Rick's sacrifice purchased that. The Beth Offer. The ABCs of Beth. Season 3, Episode 9. Rick offers Beth the choice to clone herself and leave. This is less obviously a sacrifice than giving up the caller or surrendering to the Federation, but it's worth examining as one. Rick built Fruipyland for Beth because he didn't know how to engage with her. He kept her at arm's length because she scared him, because she was too much like him. He failed her as a father in ways that were real and significant. Offering Beth the clone option is Rick trying to correct for that failure. He's saying, you can have the life I never offered you. You can have the freedom I had, the universe, the adventures, the absence of suburban limitation. You can have what I have. He is giving her his life as an option. This sacrifices Rick's relationship with Beth in a potential sense. If Beth leaves, Rick loses the daughter he came back for. He's prepared to lose her to give her what she actually wants. That willingness to let her go so she can be free is a form of sacrifice the show is careful not to overstate, but also not to ignore. The Deleted Memories. The Rick Shank Rickdemption. Season 3, Episode 1. When Rick allows Cornelius Daniel to enter his memories, he shows Daniel a version of his origin story. The specifics are fabricated. The episode reveals this is a false memory Rick constructed to trap Daniel, but the emotional content Rick uses as the bait, the memory of Diane, the memory of young Beth, the bomb, are built from real materials. Rick has to access those memories to use them as the trap. He has to handle the most painful things he carries and weaponize them against his interrogator. The Rick Shank Rickdemption doesn't dwell on what it costs Rick to use his grief as a tool. The episode is fast and exciting, and the reveal of Rick's plan is triumphant. But somewhere in the middle of that episode, Rick sat with the memories of losing Diane and Beth and constructed a narrative out of them, and used that narrative to collapse an interstellar government. He turned his grief into a weapon, and then he continued. The Memory of Diane. Hot Rick. Season 8, Episode 10, July 27th, 2025. This is the most recent and arguably the most significant sacrifice the show has given Rick. Rick deletes his memories of Diane. The ones that remain, already compromised by the Omega device Rick Prime used in Unmortrican, he jettisons into space. He releases them them deliberately. He does this, the episode makes clear, to move on, to be present in his life instead of in his grief, to stop being defined by the loss of the person he loved most. But it's worth understanding what he's giving up. His memories of Diane are the last direct connection to his original life, to the family he had before Rick Prime destroyed it, to the version of himself that existed before the nihilism was constructed as armor. He is giving up access to who he was before grief became his whole architecture. The episode frames this ambiguously, as the show tends to do with Rick's most significant choices. It's played partly as tragedy and partly as liberation. Rick sends the memory into space rather than destroying it. He's not erasing Diane, he's releasing her, letting her exist somewhere else while he lives here. But the sacrifice is real. He will not be the same person without the anchor of that grief. That anchor was also part of how he knew who he was. He's letting go of it anyway. The Morty years. This one is less dramatic and more pervasive. Rick has spent years, the entire run of the show, being someone he isn't, partially to maintain his relationship with Morty. The show's mythology suggests that Ricks are often callous, often solitary, often self-destructive in specific ways. Rick C137 keeps coming back to Morty. He keeps showing up. He keeps modulating. Not always, not perfectly, but consistently more than the average Rick, his behavior in ways that account for Morty's well-being. Morty's Mind Blowers makes this explicit. Rick has been managing Morty's psychological burden across hundreds of adventures, deciding what Morty can carry and what needs to be removed, maintaining an archive of Morty's worst experiences. This is labor. It's invisible labor. Rick does it without being asked and without being thanked. The sacrifice of the Morty years is the sacrifice of being fully himself, being the version of himself that can take responsibility for another person's well-being, being the kind of presence that considers consequences. It costs him something, some part of the freedom he had when he didn't care about anyone, and he makes that payment over and over without acknowledgement across the entire run of the show. There is one more sacrifice that runs through everything and is almost never named. Rick stayed. He stayed in the Smith household when he didn't have to. He stayed in this dimension with this family when his portal gun and his genius could have taken him anywhere. He stayed through the fights and the family dinners and the Christmas gatherings and the therapist's office visits. He stayed through the years when he could have disappeared. Every day he stayed was a choice. Every morning he woke up in that garage, in that fold-out cot with the Smith household above him. That was Rick choosing this, choosing them over the entire multiverse. That's not a dramatic sacrifice. It doesn't happen in a single moment. But across 8 seasons, the accumulation of those mornings amounts to one of the most significant commitments the show gives a character who claims to be committed to nothing. He stayed. The sacrifices section benefits from examining what Rick gives up structurally, the ongoing costs, rather than the single moments. Rick's intelligence is itself a kind of sacrifice in the context of the Smith household. He is, by the show's internal mythology, the most intelligent being in the multiverse, or close enough to it that the distinction is academic. The number of possible choices available to a mind of that caliber, the number of places he could be, the things he could build, the problems he could solve, is essentially unlimited. He spends a significant portion of his time and attention on the Smith household, on the suburban house in an unexceptional American town, on making sure Jerry doesn't get killed by threats Jerry doesn't know about, on getting Morty to school, on attending family dinners. For a mind that contains the multiverse, the Smith household is a narrow channel. Rick is, by being present in that household, choosing not to be somewhere else. The opportunity cost of Rick staying with the Smiths, measured in what he doesn't do, doesn't build, doesn't explore, is staggering. He makes this trade. He doesn't announce it. He would never call it a sacrifice. But every morning he wakes up in the garage instead of somewhere more aligned with his actual capabilities is a morning where he chose them. The voicemail to Jerry. It's discussed in the Jerry section, but it belongs in sacrifices too. Rick spent time tracking Trandor. He spent time dealing with Trandor. He spent time calling Jerry to tell him about it. These are minutes, probably more, that Rick used to protect a man he claims to find worthless. The cost is small in absolute terms. The meaning is not. Rick used his capabilities, the same capabilities that could collapse interstellar governments, to protect Jerry Smith from an ex-girlfriend's dangerous ex. He thought it was worth doing. He did it without being asked. He called to say so. The sacrifice of ego involved in that call alone is considerable for a man who maintains the contempt persona as aggressively effectively as Rick does. The collar in the void is the show's simplest sacrifice, and simple sacrifices deserve to be stated simply. Rick took off his collar. He put it on Morty. He believed he was going to dissolve into nothingness. He said, "Be good, be better than me," and he accepted it. No complex plan, no hidden backup, no maneuvering. He made the choice with the information he had, and the choice was to give Morty the means to survive, even if Rick couldn't. The show rewards Rick with a second collar. It doesn't have to. It's a choice the writers make to let Rick live. And it's the right choice for the show, because Rick's story isn't done, but the sacrifice was made before the reward arrived. The reward doesn't retroactively make the choice easier. It was made in the void, alone, believing it was the last thing he'd ever do. That is the show's simplest statement of what Rick actually values. When nothing else is possible, when all the intelligence and the portal guns and the manipulations are stripped away, what Rick does is make sure Morty survives. That's it. That's the answer. Pickle Rick, Season 3, Episode 3, deserves a space in the sacrifices section from a different angle. Rick turned himself into a pickle to avoid a therapy session. This is, at first reading, pure avoidance, a ridiculous escape from something he didn't want to face. But there's a different reading of it. Rick knew, at some level, that Dr. Wong was right. He's not a man who lacks self-awareness. He's a man who has very specific, painful self-awareness and has built an enormous infrastructure of avoidance around it. He knew that therapy would say true things about him. He made himself a pickle to avoid hearing true things about himself, because hearing true things about himself is genuinely costly. It requires him to face the gap between who he is and who he might be able to be. That gap is where the grief lives. That gap is where the failures collect. When Rick sits in Dr. Wong's office at the end of the episode and actually hears her, when he listens, however briefly, to the analysis of his avoidance, he's paying a cost. A small one, a beginning of one. The show doesn't make him continue paying it. He doesn't come back to therapy. But the moment of listening is itself a sacrifice of the armor. He lets someone see him accurately for a few minutes. For Rick, that's not nothing. The deletion of Diane. It deserves more space than the main text gave it. Rick carried 40 years of grief for Diane. 40 years of a dead wife. He built his entire persona around the loss, the nihilism that is the philosophical consequence of loving something and watching it be destroyed, the revenge quest that consumed decades, the drinking that manages the unbearable, the intelligence weaponized because it's better than feeling. He carried this not because he chose to carry it, but because he didn't know how to put it down. Grief of that magnitude doesn't come with instructions. You don't get a manual for how to stop loving someone who was murdered. You just live in the architecture of the loss until the architecture becomes the only home you have. And then, in the Season 8 finale, Rick jettisons his memory of Diane into space. The episode frames this ambiguously, as the show tends to frame its most significant choices. It's partly liberation and partly loss. Rick is releasing something that has been the center of his life for 4 decades. Without it, without the grief and the love and the memory of what was lost, he doesn't know yet who he'll be, but he does it for Beth. Because sitting in the sub-basement with his damaged daughter and watching her grieve a mother she barely remembers, Rick decided the grief has taken enough. It's time to be here. Releasing Diane is not forgetting her. The memory goes into space rather than being destroyed. Rick sends it away rather than eliminating it. He lets her exist somewhere that isn't in his head, in the architecture of his daily choices. He lets her be a past he no longer has to rebuild his present around. This is the sacrifice that costs Rick the most. More than the collar, more than the surrender, more than the decades of failed revenge. Because this sacrifice requires him to give up the thing that organized his entire existence for 40 years and try to become something new. At Rick's age, a man who has been grief organized for this long, that is the bravest thing the show has given him to do. There is something significant in the fact that Rick keeps surviving things that should kill him. Not just physically, though the show is generous in how many times Rick physically survives what should be lethal, but emotionally, Rick has survived the unsurvivable at the level of loss. Diane, the original Beth, the resistance, Birdperson's conversion, Squanchy's fate, decades of failed revenge. Each of these losses would have, in a different show, destroyed the character or transformed them beyond recognition. Rick keeps going. He keeps functioning. He keeps being present in his damaged and imperfect way for the people who who are still alive. The survival itself is a form of the sacrifice this section documents. It costs something to keep going after losses of that magnitude. It costs something to not simply retreat into the distance that those losses would justify. Rick could have, at various points in the show's timeline, stopped showing up, stopped coming back to the Smith household, stopped caring about outcomes, stopped investing in people who might be taken from him again. He doesn't stop. There is a version of Rick Sanchez who, after Diane and the original Beth died, simply became a different kind of person, colder, more remote, more fully committed to the nihilism he performs. There is a version who stopped having the capacity for the caller in the void moment because the capacity for that kind of love was burned out by grief. Rick C137 is not that version. The capacity persists. It costs him to maintain it. You can see what it costs in the drinking, in the near-suicidal breakdown after Unity's departure. In the 40 years, he couldn't let go of Diane's memory, but the capacity persists. He keeps being able to give his collar to Morty. That's not nothing. After everything, it's not nothing. There is a category of Rick's sacrifices that involves his relationship to his own story. Rick is, in the standard telling, the protagonist of his own life. He is the most important being in any room. He is the one who knows most, who acts most decisively, who produces the most spectacular outcomes. The show frequently structures itself around Rick's intelligence and agency, and Rick knows this about himself. And yet, across 8 seasons, there are significant moments where Rick consciously deprioritizes his own story to make space for other people's. The ABCs of Beth is the clearest example. Rick gives Beth the clone option, an enormous gift that allows her to have a life beyond the suburban constraints, and then leaves. He removes himself from the decision. He doesn't watch. He doesn't influence. He gives her the choice and gets out of the frame so she can make it without him looming over it. This is an act of narrative sacrifice. Rick, who inserts himself into most situations, deliberately absents himself from the most important decision Beth will ever make so that the decision can actually belong to her. The sacrifice of Rick's public image is another recurring theme. Rick maintains a specific reputation in the family, someone who doesn't care, who operates for his own purposes, who tolerates the Smiths primarily because they serve his practical interests. This reputation is protective. It keeps people from leaning on him too hard, from expecting things he can't consistently deliver, but maintaining it costs him. Every time he does something genuinely caring and deflects the acknowledgement, every time he does something protective and performs indifference, he is choosing the armor over the connection. He is sacrificing the possibility of being genuinely appreciated for who he is in order to maintain the persona that keeps him from having to be vulnerable. The persona is the sacrifice. It's the thing Rick pays for his own protection. The collar moment, where Rick says, "Be good, Morty, be better than me," in a voice no one is meant to hear, is the show's clearest view under the armor. He is better than the persona. He knows it. He keeps paying for the persona anyway because the thing under it is too breakable to expose. The sacrifice of the reunion with Rick Prime's defeat deserves careful examination. When Rick finally kills Rick Prime in Unmortrican, Season 7, Episode 5, the show doesn't give Rick a triumphant moment of catharsis. The revenge that organized his life for decades is complete, and the show depicts this as hollow in a specific way. The killing of Rick Prime doesn't bring back Diane, it doesn't restore the original Beth, it doesn't undo the years of grief. It provides an ending to the revenge narrative, but endings and resolutions are not the same thing. Rick Prime is killed, and then evil Morty uses the Omega device to erase Diane from all of reality, including from Rick's memories. The revenge is accomplished and immediately eclipsed by a new loss. This is the show's most brutal statement about the sacrifice of revenge orientation. Rick spent decades on a quest that, at its completion, produced both its conclusion and a new wound simultaneously. The sacrifices of those decades, the life he didn't build, the normal grief he didn't process, the relationships he didn't fully inhabit, were paid, and the payment produced something real, and then, immediately, there was something new to grieve. He absorbs this. He continues. He chooses, in Season 8, to release his fragmented memories of Diane rather than carry the new wound as he carried the old one. This is the sacrifice the show has been building toward, the sacrifice of grief itself. The willingness to put down the thing that organized his existence so that existence can be organized around something else. He makes that sacrifice in the Season 8 finale. It is the hardest thing in a life full of hard things, and he does it, at least in part, for Beth. Section 9. The Hidden Compassion of Rick Sanchez. If you search the show for moments of Rick being openly warm, openly kind, openly gentle, you'll find them. They're there, but they're rare, and the show usually buries them quickly, as if embarrassed by them. What you find far more often is the hidden version, compassion operating through indirection, care expressed as action rather than emotion, warmth that requires interpretation to recognize because it's never labeled as warmth. This section is about the moments when Rick's compassion surfaces, where you can see it operating even when Rick is doing everything he can to deny it. Autoerotic Assimilation, Season 2, Episode 3, August 9th, 2015. Written by Ryan Ridley, directed by Dominic Polcino. The episode's A-plot involves Rick reconnecting with Unity, a hive mind that assimilates planets and that Rick was in a relationship with at some previous point in his life. Rick and Unity reconnect, and Rick slides into the pleasure of being in a relationship with someone who can literally give him whatever he wants, an entire planet organized around his preferences. Unity eventually breaks up with Rick. The letter she leaves explains why. Rick is the only person whose influence Unity finds difficult to resist, and that loss of control frightens her. Being around Rick makes Unity make choices she wouldn't otherwise make. She loves him, and she can't be near him. Rick's response, alone in the garage, is to attempt suicide. The show shows this directly. Rick constructs a death device. He tests it. He positions himself under it. He passes out from alcohol before it fires. The morning after, Rick cleans up. He restores the garage to normal. He goes back to being Rick. This moment is the show's first direct statement that Rick's inner life is considerably darker than his persona suggests. The nihilism isn't just a personality style. It sits over something real, a genuine hollowness, a genuine despair that surfaces when the distraction is removed. What does this have to do with compassion? Earlier in the same episode, when Rick encounters a dying alien at the planet's surface, a creature caught in a moment of biological irrelevance, confused and ending, Rick sits with it. He tells it something. He offers it a kind of presence in its final moment. This is a small thing. It's easy to miss, but in an episode about Rick's capacity for despair, the show also gives him a moment of tenderness toward a creature that has nothing to offer him, that doesn't connect to any of his relationships or objectives. He sits with something that is dying, and he is present for it, hidden, almost invisible, but there. Pickle Rick, Season 3, Episode 3, August 6th, 2017. Written by Jessica Gao, directed by Anthony Chun. The episode that won the Emmy for Outstanding Animated Program. Rick turns himself into a pickle to avoid a family therapy session. The sequence of events that follows involves Rick surviving through improvised violence, building a crude exoskeleton out of rat parts, fighting through a sewer, then through a foreign embassy. At the end of the episode, the surviving characters end up in the therapist's office anyway. Dr. Wong, played by Susan Sarandon, addresses Rick specifically. She says something that the show frames as more or less correct, that Rick's elaborate intelligence is a pain avoidance machine, that the complexity of his solutions exists partly to give him something to do instead of feeling things. Rick doesn't dispute this. He doesn't fully accept it either, but he listens. He listens to Dr. Wong. This is extraordinary. Rick doesn't listen to anyone. He preemptively knows what everyone is going to say and is already contemptuous of it before they say it. He listens to Dr. Wong, and at the end of the session, when Dr. Wong offers them another appointment and Rick says he doesn't think he's coming back, his delivery is not triumphant. It's tired. It's the voice of someone who found the thing that was offered valuable and is choosing not to take it because taking it would require doing harder work than even pickle-based embassy sieges. He doesn't come back to Dr. Wong, but he heard her, and the hearing is visible in the pause before he declines. Look Who's Purging Now, Season 2, Episode 9, September 27th, 2015. Written by Dan Gutterman, directed by Brian Newton. This episode involves Rick and Morty landing on a planet that conducts an annual purge, all crime legal for one night. The society is divided between the violent majority and the lighthouse keeper's daughter, Arthricia, who is trying to leave. Rick helps Arthricia. He gets Morty a battlesuit. He facilitates a revolution against the ruling class that has been using the purge to maintain power while pretending it's culture. The revolution is helped because Rick is fundamentally opposed to systems that use spectacle to keep the weak in line. He has a specific contempt for powerful institutions that hurt people and call it tradition. He has, buried under layers of nihilism, something that functions like a political conscience. Arthricia
Arthricia leaves the planet. Rick helps make that possible. He doesn't know Arthricia. He doesn't owe her anything. He helps because the situation is clearly unjust, and Rick, when confronted with clear injustice, has an impulse to do something about it. Something Wicked This Way Comes, Season 1, Episode 9. When Rick sets up a shop across the street from the devil to counter-curse every item the devil sells, he is ostensibly doing it for the intellectual pleasure of defeating a supernatural entity. He says this explicitly. He claims it's about proving his superior intelligence. And it is about that, but it's also about the fact that the devil is harming people in Rick's neighborhood. Rick counter-curses the items and gives them back to people as usable things. He is, however, accidentally and through whatever motivation, helping people. The show doesn't give Rick credit for this. It lets him claim the intellectual motivation entirely. But the result, people in the neighborhood getting useful things for free, the devil's predatory business disrupted, is a net good that Rick produced. Hidden compassion in an episode-length scale. Raising Gazorpazorp, Season 1, Episode 7. Morty Jr., the half-alien child Morty has in this episode, is a being of pure aggression. He grows to adult size in a matter of days. He destroys things. He can't be reasoned with in the way a human child can be. And yet, Rick allows Morty Jr. to exist through the episode. He could have neutralized the situation immediately and decisively. He doesn't. He gives Morty time with his son, such as it is. He lets Morty try. Later in the episode, when Morty Jr. asks to be free, Rick allows him to leave. He goes to his planet of origin. Rick could have stopped this, could have neutralized the threat. He lets Morty Jr. go because Morty Jr. asked to go, and Morty cares about his son, and Rick cares about Morty. This is compassion operating through 3 layers. Rick cares about Morty, so he lets Morty's son exist. Rick respects the son's autonomy enough to let him choose his own path. Rick accepts the messiness of an unsatisfying resolution because the alternatives would hurt Morty. The Analyze Piss episode, Season 6, Episode 8, October 30th, 2022. Written by James Siciliano and Rob Schraub. Directed by Lucas Gray. This episode involves Rick's relationship with the show's gallery of minor supervillains, entities who dedicate themselves to tormenting Rick specifically. Rick has always responded to these with dismissive violence. In this episode, Rick tries something different. He gives one of the villains, a character called Pissmaster, a chance. He doesn't destroy him immediately. He tries to understand the situation. He offers the possibility of something other than conflict. The episode doesn't fully redeem the villain. The resolution is still dark in the way the show tends to be dark, but the fact that Rick attempted it, the fact that Rick considered a different approach, that's worth noting. Rick, by Season 6, has had enough experience with the cost of trauma and grief and destructive cycles that he's occasionally willing to try to interrupt them. Not always, not reliably, but occasionally. The hidden compassion of Rick Sanchez is not something the show makes easy to see. It's buried in quick cuts, in side glances, in moments that immediately get covered by a joke. It operates through his actions rather than his words, through what he does when no one is asking him to do it, through the things he builds and fixes and prevents that no one ever thanks him for. But it's there. It was always there. The man who says, "I am in great pain, please help me," in a language most people don't speak, is also the man who, when he finds someone else in pain, finds a way to do something about it. Not always, not cleanly, not without making it weird, but he tries. In his own broken, sideways, denial-wrapped way, he tries. The Hidden Compassion section benefits from more examples across the full run. Anatomy Park, Season 1, Episode 3. Rick built an amusement park inside a dying man named Ruben, a vagrant he'd befriended, and then, apparently, spent considerable time and expertise constructing a park inside of. Before the episode begins, Rick created something elaborate and detailed and labor-intensive inside a person most other characters wouldn't have looked at twice. He made Ruben's interior into something worth visiting, something with attractions and rides and a whole world. He built it because Ruben, the outside of Ruben, the homeless man that other people passed without looking at, was the kind of person Rick apparently chose to engage with. The park doesn't work out. The venture fails catastrophically, and Ruben dies, and the miniaturized park adventurers have to escape. But the fact that the park existed, that Rick built something this elaborate inside a person most people ignored, says something about what Rick pays attention to. He noticed Ruben. He invested in Ruben. He spent real time and skill on a project that most people would have dismissed as impossible or pointless. The Meeseeks situation in Meeseeks and Destroy is partly comedy
reality and partly something darker about Rick's relationship to suffering. The Meeseeks creatures pop into existence to fulfill a task and then cease to exist. Their entire consciousness is organized around a single purpose. When the task becomes difficult, when Jerry's golf request leads to Meeseeks existing longer than they're designed to exist, they begin to experience what the show frames as existential agony. Extended existence is suffering for them. Rick designed this, or understood this when he made the Meeseeks box available to the family. The show plays this for dark comedy, which is where the show lives, but there's a compassionate reading available. Rick understands that certain forms of consciousness are built around purpose, and that purposelessness is painful. He built the Meeseeks creatures to be released from their existence once their purpose is fulfilled. He gave them an ending. This is a strange form of mercy, but it's mercy within the framework of what Rick is, someone who builds things and has to decide what kind of inner life those things have. Rest and Rick-laxation. Season 3, Episode 6, August 27th, 2017. This episode is underread as a compassion episode. It's usually analyzed as a comedy about Rick's toxins, the arrogance and the contempt and the self-destructive edge being separated from his person. But what the toxic separation reveals is important. The Rick without his toxins, the clean Rick, is more considerate, more gentle, more capable of warmth. Clean Rick is still Rick. He still has the intelligence and the capability. He just doesn't have the layer of contempt that usually covers everything. The show makes a specific argument here. Rick's contempt, his harshness, his difficulty, these are the toxins. They're the protective layer over something softer underneath. They're not his true self. They're his defense mechanism, elevated to a defining characteristic over decades of practice. What Rick has to do to resolve the episode's crisis is reabsorb the toxins. He has to take back the ugliness, deliberately. He has to pull the contempt and the self-destructiveness back into himself to be a complete person again. And he does it. He chooses to reabsorb his own toxicity because the alternative, being clean but incomplete, is also a kind of harm. He carries his own darkness because carrying it is what a complete person does with the difficult parts of themselves. There's something compassionate in this, pointed inward. Rick doesn't abandon his difficult parts. He integrates them. He takes responsibility for them by taking them back into himself. The Whirly-Durly Conspiracy, Season 3, Episode 5. Inside the wormhole, Rick and Jerry have a conversation that is honest in a way that the show usually doesn't allow Rick to be. Rick admits things. He admits that Jerry's love for Beth is real. He speaks truthfully about what he sees in Jerry's commitment to Beth. He gives Jerry genuine information about himself. Not flattering, but true, and meant to help Jerry understand his own situation. This is Rick being compassionate towards someone he genuinely dislikes, in a context where his usual defenses don't work. The wormhole's reality distortion makes honesty unavoidable, but Rick uses the honesty constructively. He tells Jerry things that are true rather than things that will hurt him most effectively. He doesn't have to be constructively honest in the wormhole. He could be cruel. He has the material. He knows Jerry's weaknesses. He chooses instead to tell Jerry something true that Jerry can actually use. That's a small, weird act of kindness. Barely visible, easily dismissed, but it's there. Morty Night Run, Season 2, Episode 2, has a compassion dimension that doesn't get discussed often. When Morty kills Fart, the gaseous alien he saved and then had to destroy to protect all carbon-based life, the weight of this falls on Morty heavily. He saved something he came to care about. He then had to kill it. Rick doesn't minimize this for Morty. He doesn't say, "I told you so," in a way that makes Morty feel worse. He doesn't exploit the moment to demonstrate his superiority or to prove that Morty's impulse to save Fart was wrong. He's present for Morty in the aftermath, quietly, without making a thing of it. This is what compassionate presence looks like from Rick. Not talking about it, not processing it, not making Morty name the difficulty, just being there, not going anywhere, not making the silence into a lesson. The pattern of Rick's hidden compassion across all 9 sections of this documentary has a consistent shape. He moves toward people in pain rather than away from them. He does things for people that no one asked him to do. He notices the beings that other characters don't notice. The dying alien, the vagrant with an elaborate park inside him, the Jerry in a wormhole who can hear truth if it's offered right. He is, underneath the persona, someone who pays attention to what is hurting around him, and he does something about it. Not always the right thing, not always enough, but something.
He moves, he acts, he stays when leaving would be easier. The show has been saying this since Birdperson told Morty what wubba lubba dub dub really means. The phrase translates to, "I am in great pain, please help me." Rick says it to people who don't know what it means. He is asking, in the only language he allows himself, for the kind of help he extends to others. He is both the one who helps and the one who needs help. He performs the first and conceals the second. And in the gap between the performance and the concealment, in the moments when action breaks through the armor, you find the actual person.
Compassionate, broken, still trying. One more form of Rick's compassion that the show demonstrates without naming: his relationship to beauty. Rick builds things. He builds constantly, and many of the things he builds are weapons or escape devices or tools for manipulation. But he also builds Fruipyland, an entire pocket universe filled with gentle, beautiful, harmless things. A world designed to delight a child. Breathable water, bouncy terrain, soft creatures that couldn't hurt anyone. He built that for Beth. He built her a world because he didn't know how to be the father she needed, and he could build worlds, so he built one. He filled it with the kind of careful, considered gentleness that his persona doesn't allow him to express directly. Fruipyland is Rick's love letter to young Beth, the love letter he didn't know how to write in any other form. Built, not spoken, world-shaped, not word-shaped. The Garage Lab is, in a different way, a love letter to Morty. Rick built his lab at the family's house. He could have a lab anywhere. He has it here, above the family he chose, accessible to the grandson he keeps taking on adventures. The lab is where he lives. The family is why he lives there. The ship's autonomous defense system, instructed to protect Summer, is another small love letter. Leave the ship. Be gone for however long, but protect Summer. Rick expresses care through what he builds and leaves behind to operate on his behalf. He makes objects that function as stand-ins for the love he can't articulate. The collar, the defense system, Fruipyland, the Mind Blower's archive, the clone option, the voicemail. These are all objects, mechanisms, constructions, things Rick made that do the work of love in Rick's absence or in place of Rick's words. He is a man who builds things, and many of the most important things he builds are built for the people he won't say he loves. Final note for the listener. This documentary has been 3 hours long in idea and 2 hours long in practice, and if you've stayed with it through all of it, if you've been somewhere between awake and asleep for all of this, with the voice keeping you company through Rick Sanchez's impossible contradictions, thank you for staying. The show is still running. Season 9 premiered in May 2026, and Rick is still out there, still making terrible decisions and occasionally heroic ones, still choosing the Smith household, still being the man who gives his collar to his grandson and then curses at God when he survives. The story is ongoing, but even at this point in the story, the evidence is substantial. The moments are documented. They're there if you go back and look, if you pull them out of the punchlines and sit with them in the quiet. A drunk old scientist, alone in a void, taking off his collar and putting it around the neck of the boy he loves. Be good, Morty. Be better than me. He showed up. Sleep well. The Hidden Compassion section has one more dimension worth addressing. Rick's treatment of beings the show places at the margins. Across 8 seasons, Rick encounters alien creatures, entities, and beings that most of the human characters don't register as fully worth engaging. The dying alien in autoerotic assimilation. The alien prisoner he kept in his basement for experiments. A morally complicated situation, but one that ends with Rick releasing the prisoner rather than simply abandoning it. The Meeseeks, whose brief consciousness he designed to end rather than persist indefinitely. The Microverse inhabitants, a genuinely terrible situation, but one where Rick continues to engage with them as beings rather than simply as a power source. Rick's relationship to non-human consciousness is complicated. He's done terrible things to non-human entities, but there's a consistent pattern. When the entities are clearly experiencing something, of Rick not being able to fully pretend not to notice. He notices. He doesn't always act well on what he notices, but the noticing is real. real, and it distinguishes him from the version of Rick who simply wouldn't register the dying alien, or who would have left the Meeseeks suffering in extended existence without a mechanism for ending it. He builds the ending into the design. He sits with the dying thing. He notices what is experiencing something around him. This is compassion operating at the broadest register of its meaning, a basic orientation of attention towards suffering, even suffering that provides no strategic benefit to notice. There is a form of hidden compassion that the show demonstrates in how Rick handles knowledge. Rick knows things other people don't. He knows things that, if shared, would damage the people he cares about.
Sometimes he shares this knowledge, as when he tells Birdperson about his daughter, or tells Beth she was real, or tells Morty, be better than me, in the void. But sometimes he doesn't share it. He manages what people know carefully, calibrating against what they can bear. The Mindblower's Archive is an example of this calibrated management. Rick keeps the memories Morty can't carry, so Morty isn't crushed by the full weight of what their adventures have cost. This is compassion through editorial control of someone else's reality. It's invasive. It's arguably a violation of Morty's autonomy, but the intention, to protect Morty from psychological weights he can't manage, is compassionate. The Beth clone decision, where Rick erased his own memory of which Beth is original, is another form of this. Rick is protecting both Beths from having a father who secretly prefers one over the other. He removes the information from himself to make the protection possible. He manages knowledge as a form of care. He gives people what they can use and absorbs what they can't. He makes himself the keeper of difficult truths so that others don't have to carry them. This is a particular kind of compassion, exhausting, hidden, never acknowledged, that runs through the series at every level. Section 10. Was Rick actually a hero? We spent 9 sections cataloging specific moments: the caller in the void, the surrender, the King Jellybean kill, the Birdperson restoration, the voicemail to Jerry, the season finale of season 8, hundreds of smaller gestures, a defensive position in an alien corridor, a counter-cursed shop, an honest conversation in a wormhole. Now the final question: does any of it add up to heroism? The honest answer is, it depends on what you mean by heroism, and the show is aware that it depends on that. There's a classical definition of heroism that Rick doesn't meet. The classical hero is virtuous. The classical hero has a commitment to the good that runs through everything he does. The classical hero's failures are deviations from a fundamentally noble character. Rick is not that. Rick's failures aren't deviations. They're structural. They're built into how he operates. The thousands of enslaved beings in his car battery are not the exception. They're the cost-benefit calculation of a man who decided that his convenience was worth more than their freedom. Rick fails ethically on a regular basis, and on a scale that most people never get the opportunity to match. So if heroism requires overall goodness, Rick doesn't qualify. There's a narrower definition of heroism that the show does seem to have in mind. A hero, in this narrower sense, is someone who, in specific moments, acts for others at cost to themselves. Someone who makes the harder choice when the easier choice is available. Someone who shows up when they don't have to. By this definition, the one the show actually uses, Rick has moments of heroism, real ones. A Rickle in time, the Wedding Squanchers bar scene, the King Jellybean portal shot, the months alone in the garage restoring Birdperson, the voicemail to Jerry about Trandor, every version of the season finale where Rick tears down the system threatening his family, the Hot Rick finale, sitting with Beth in the sub-basement, admitting he wasn't there and choosing to be there now. These moments didn't have to happen. Rick could have made different choices. He made the ones he made. There's a third definition worth considering, the one that comes from the show's own mythology about Ricks. The show establishes that there are infinite Ricks. Every Rick is the smartest person in his dimension. Every Rick has the same basic potential, the same basic origin, the same basic circumstances. What makes them different is the choices they make over time. Most Ricks become what the show calls, with deliberate irony, the most self-centered beings in existence. They start with the same grief Rick C-137 carries, and they respond by abandoning everything. They use their intelligence to serve themselves. They form the Citadel to consolidate power. They treat Mortys as tools. Rick C-137 is different. Not completely different. He has the same failures, the same selfishness, the same capacity for cruelty, but he made different choices at enough forks in the road that he ended up somewhere
somewhere different. He stayed with a family he didn't have to stay with. He rebuilt a friend he could have buried. He told the truth to Birdperson about his daughter when hiding the truth would have been easier. He gave Morty his collar. In the context of what all Ricks could be, what most Ricks become, Rick C137's choices constitute a specific and meaningful difference. Not perfection, but a different direction. The Evil Morty arc, which culminates in Season 5's finale, Rick Mirai Jack, and continues through Season 7, makes an argument about what Rick's choices mean. Evil Morty has decided that the relationship between Ricks and Mortys is fundamentally exploitative, that Ricks use Mortys, that the whole dynamic is a power structure masquerading as affection. He's not wrong about Ricks in general. The Citadel confirms everything he says. What Evil Morty can't account for, what his theory doesn't have space for, is Rick C137, who gave his collar to Morty, who kills King Jellybean without being asked, who stays. Evil Morty's theory is correct for most of the infinite Ricks. It's correct that the Rick-Morty relationship is often exploitative. It's correct that Mortys are often used, and it's still incomplete because it doesn't explain Rick C137's specific behavior. It doesn't explain why this Rick is different from most Ricks in the ways that matter. The theory, applied universally, misses the one Rick who seems to be doing something different. Fear No Mort, the Season 7 finale, gives the show's clearest statement about what Rick's relationship with Morty actually is. In the dimension of pure fear, Rick's greatest fear is Morty. Not losing Morty in the abstract, specific fears about specific things happening to Morty. The man who claims to fear nothing, who has faced death so many times he's developed a casual relationship with it, who has survived the loss of his wife and daughter and best friend, this man's deepest fear is about his grandson. That fear is love. The show doesn't say it. It doesn't need to. Fear and love, for people who have lost enough, become the same thing. You only fear losing what you love. Rick loves Morty. The show has been saying this through action for 7 seasons. The Season 7 finale says it through Rick's fear. The Season 8 finale, Hot Rick, adds one more layer to the question of heroism. Rick deletes his memories of Diane. He releases 40 years of grief into space rather than carry it forward. He sits with Beth in the sub-basement and admits his failures and chooses to be present. This is not heroism in the traditional action movie sense, but it might be the hardest thing the show has given Rick to do, because it requires him to stop being defined by his past, to stop being the man who lost everything and started building armor, to become, instead, the man who is here, now, with the people who are alive. Rick Sanchez spent most of 8 seasons not quite able to be fully present because the grief was too heavy and the guilt too pervasive and the persona too necessary. The Season 8 finale is the first time the show suggests he might be able to put some of that down. Heroism in this reading is the ongoing work of choosing presence over escape. It's the choice, made daily, to be here instead of somewhere easier. By this definition, Rick becomes a hero not in a single moment, but across the entire run of the show, moment by moment, in the accumulation of choices to stay and show up and not disappear. So, was Rick actually a hero? He was not a good man. He won't be. The moral ledger has things in it that can't be forgiven and haven't been accounted for. The enslaved beings, the abandoned dimension, the casual violence against people and creatures who didn't deserve it, the manipulation of people he claimed to love. He was also not simply a villain. The evidence doesn't support that reading either. A villain doesn't give his collar to his grandson in a quantum void. A villain doesn't spend months alone in a garage rebuilding a friend from the inside out. A villain doesn't leave voicemails to protect people who don't know they need protecting. What Rick is, what the show has been carefully constructing across 9 years and 8 seasons and more than 80 episodes, is something harder to name. He is a person who has been shaped by extraordinary loss into someone who protects what he loves with extraordinary intensity while simultaneously being constitutionally unable to admit that he loves anything. He is the paradox of the person who acts most heroically in the specific moments when he claims heroism means nothing. He saves Morty and mocks Morty. He saves Beth and neglects Beth. He saves Jerry and despises Jerry. He restores Birdperson and almost withholds the most important truth from him. He makes sacrifices and takes credit for none of them. What makes Rick Sanchez one of television's most complicated characters is not that he's secretly good. It's that he's undeniably good at specific moments, undeniably terrible at others. And the specific moments of goodness are never sufficient to erase what surrounds them, but they're also too real to be dismissed. They happened in a quantum void, in a bar with a photograph, in a garage in the middle of the night, through a portal at the departing back of a king, in a sub-basement with a daughter he failed and is trying to find again. They happened. And that, in the end, is what this documentary has been sitting with. Not the question of who Rick really is. That question doesn't have a clean answer, and the show knows it, but the evidence that he showed up when it mattered most for the people he would never admit to loving. He showed up, not every time, not cleanly, not without cost to the people he showed up for, but enough times to matter. Enough times to be worth sitting with in the quiet hours of the night, when the show is playing softly and you're somewhere between awake and asleep, and the voice is just talking, calmly and without performance, about a drunk old scientist and what he chose to do with the love he couldn't say out loud. He chose to act on it. And if you watch carefully, if you look past the belching and the nihilism and the chaos and the punchlines that swallow the sincere moments, you'll find it everywhere, hidden, consistent, real. The conclusion section benefits from an extended treatment of the show's central philosophical argument, which has been built across 9 seasons. The question of whether Rick is a hero is, at its heart, a question about moral worth, not about good acts. Rick performs good acts, not about good intentions. Rick sometimes has good intentions. The question is about whether Rick deserves the moral category of hero, and what that category even means when applied to someone as complicated as he is. The conventional hero's journey, call to adventure, transformation through trials, return with wisdom, doesn't map cleanly onto Rick. He doesn't transform. The things that happen to him across 8 seasons don't produce a cleaner, better version of himself. They produce a slightly more processed version of his grief, a slightly more acknowledged version of his love, and no reduction in his willingness to do terrible things. This is, by most narrative conventions, a failure of the hero's journey. The character hasn't been changed enough. The moral arc doesn't arc enough. But Rick and Morty has always been interested in what happens to people who don't complete the arc. The show's most honest argument is that most people don't complete the arc. Most people are shaped by their damage in ways they don't fully overcome. Most people carry their difficult parts alongside their good parts indefinitely, without resolution. Rick is, in this reading, the show's most honest main character, not despite his moral complexity, because of it. The evil Morty argument, which builds across multiple seasons and reaches its statement in Rick Mirai Jack, is the show's structural challenge to Rick's heroism. Evil Morty argues that Ricks are exploiters, that the Rick-Morty relationship is fundamentally predatory, a high-intelligence being attaching itself to a lower-intelligence being and draining value from that attachment while calling it partnership or love. He builds the Citadel as evidence. He points to the infinite Rick-Morty pairings as proof that the relationship replicates systemically the same dynamic of use. Evil Morty is not wrong about Ricks in general. The Citadel confirms his thesis. Most Ricks do treat Mortys as tools. Most Ricks would not give their collar to their Morty. Most Ricks would not kill King Jellybean without announcement. Most Ricks would not spend decades in a garage trying to rebuild a friend. Evil Morty's theory is correct for the system. It's wrong about Rick C-137. And this is the show's argument, delivered through action rather than speech. Rick C-137 is not most Ricks. The evidence distinguishes him. Not perfectly, not in every episode, not in every choice, but in the choices that reveal what he actually values when everything else is stripped away. The show doesn't say Rick is a hero. It shows you the specific choices Rick makes when the stakes are real and leaves you to decide what those choices add up to. They add up to someone who is not most Ricks. Dan Harmon has spoken publicly about the emotional architecture of Rick and Morty in interviews across the show's run. The core of Rick's character, as Harmon has described it, is the tension between Rick's intelligence and Rick's love. He's smart enough to know that caring about things is statistically likely to end in loss. He's lost enough to have empirical data on this, and he cares anyway. That's not wisdom. That's not rationality. That's something deeper than both. The constitutive human, or Rick, act of continuing continuing to form attachments despite knowing that attachments end. Rick forms attachments. He doesn't stop forming them, despite everything the universe has done to punish him for having them. He attaches to Morty and Summer and Beth and Jerry and Birdperson and Squanchy. He keeps doing it. He would deny it if you named it, but the behavior is there. The heroism in this framing is not in any single act of rescue or sacrifice. It's in the ongoing choice to remain open to loss by remaining open to love. After Diane, after the original Beth, after Birdperson, after Squanchy, Rick keeps caring about people. That's not nothing. For someone who has lost what Rick has lost, that's everything. Fear No More makes the show's most direct statement about what Rick's heroism costs him emotionally. His greatest fear is organized around Morty. Not dying, not losing, Morty specifically. The scenarios the dimension of pure fear constructs for Rick are specific, particular things happening to this particular person. Fear of this specificity is not the fear of a man who is successfully detached. It's the fear of a man who is still very much attached, who knows exactly how much loss he can survive because he's already survived a great deal of it, and who knows that losing Morty would be another thing he'd have to carry forward. Rick has already survived the unsurvivable. He knows he'll survive it again if he has to, but survival and being okay are not the same thing. Rick survives. He is not always okay. His greatest fear is organized around making Morty another thing he survives but is not okay about. Hot Rick, the season 8 finale, adds the final piece to the heroism question. After everything, after 40 years, after the collar in the void and the surrender to the Federation and the years in the garage and the Beth clone option and the long hunt for Rick Prime and Birdperson's restoration and the Diane deletion, Rick is still here in the Smith household with this family. He chose to delete his memories of Diane so he could be more present for the family he has. He gave up the grief that organized him to be more available to the people who are alive. This is not redemption. The show is careful about this. Rick hasn't repaid what he owes. He hasn't fixed what he's broken. He hasn't become a good person in the conventional sense. He has become slightly more present, slightly more willing to be seen, slightly more able to let people matter to him without immediately building armor around it. That's the arc of 8 seasons, not transformation, increment. Imperfect, inconsistent, real increment. The heroism of Rick Sanchez is not the heroism of triumph. It's the heroism of continuation, of showing up again, of choosing for the 10,000th time to stay. So the question, was Rick a hero? The show has been building toward a specific answer. Not yes, not no. Something more honest than either. Rick is a person who contains heroism, who is capable of it, who produces it, who acts heroically in the moments that matter most, without being a hero in the organized, continuous, morally clean sense. He gives Morty his collar and curses at God 2 seconds later. He kills King Jellybean and says nothing. He surrenders to the Federation and sits in a bar with a photograph. He restores Birdperson and tells him about his daughter. He gives Beth the clone option and walks away before he has to watch her choose. He deletes his memories of Diane and tries, for the first time in 40 years, to be fully present. Each of these is a heroic moment inside a life that contains them. The life doesn't become heroic just because the moments are. The moments remain real, even though the life around them is complicated. That's the show's honest answer. Not a clean verdict, a true one. The moments happened. They're documented in the episode record. They're inarguable. Rick Sanchez was not a hero. Rick Sanchez had moments of heroism. He had more of them than his persona would lead you to expect. He had them in places where no one was watching, at costs he refused to name, for people he claimed not to love. The moments happened, and in the quiet hours, somewhere between awake and asleep, with the show playing softly and the voice talking calmly about what one man chose to do with the love he couldn't say out loud, the moments are worth remembering, because they tell you something true about him, and, quietly, about the rest of us too. The final note is this. The reason this documentary exists, the reason any of this is worth examining, is that Rick and Morty has been doing something rare in its genre. It's been tracking the full moral complexity of a single character across 9 years of television without smoothing the edges, without providing easy resolution, without giving either the nihilists or the sentimentalists exactly what they they want. Rick is not vindicated. He's not condemned. He's shown. The show shows him giving his collar to Morty and mocking Morty 5 minutes later. It shows him surrendering to the Federation and then doing a speech in the garage about Szechuan sauce that makes you wonder whether the surrender was partly self-serving. It shows him rebuilding Birdperson from the inside and also letting Summer sit in a cage in his ship for an episode. It shows him being the worst person in the room and the person who saves the room, sometimes in the same scene. This is what complex characterization looks like at its best. Not a character who is dark and then becomes light, a character who is both, continuously, in specific proportions that shift based on what the moment requires of him. Rick Sanchez is the show's commitment to the idea that people are not their worst moments and not their best moments, but the accumulation of all their moments across time, and that the accumulation, examined honestly, produces something that doesn't fit neatly into any category. Heroic in specific moments, monstrous in others, present when it matters most, even when presence is the last thing you'd expect from him. That's who he is. That's why he's worth watching. That's why, in the quiet late night hours, with your eyes closing and the voice just talking about what Rick did and why, that's why it lands. Because somewhere in Rick's impossible contradictions, there's something recognizable, something that the best of us aspires to, and the worst of us admits to, and all of us contains. The love that can't quite find its words, the protection that can't quite name itself, the showing up that happens again and again despite everything, because the alternative is not showing up. He showed up in a quantum void and a Federation prison and a bar with a photograph and a garage in the middle of the night and a sub-basement where his daughter was falling apart. He showed up. That's the whole story. One last thing worth saying before this closes. The show's title is Rick and Morty. Not Rick, not Morty. Both of them together as a unit. The show is named for the relationship. Every heroic act documented in this script is, in some dimension, an act performed in service of that relationship. Not just Morty, the whole family, the friends, the people Rick has accumulated around him. But the relationship with Morty is the center around which everything else orbits. Rick is, in the mythology of the show, the most dangerous being in the known multiverse. He has the intelligence, the technology, the experience, and the absence of conventional moral constraints to be genuinely terrifying at scale. Other Ricks have been. Rick Prime was. Rick C-137 isn't. Not primarily. He's dangerous, yes. He does terrible things. But the organizing force of his life, from the pilot episode onward, is not the exercise of that danger. It's the relationship with Morty. It's the Smith household. It's the people he chose and kept choosing. The most intelligent being in the multiverse chose to spend his intelligence on a suburban family in an ordinary American town. He chose to use his portal gun to take his grandson on adventures rather than to maximize his personal power. He chose again and again to be Morty's grandfather rather than whatever he could have been instead. That choice, made daily, expressed in the collar and the king and the voicemail and the months in the garage, is the answer to the question this documentary has been asking. Was Rick a hero? He was a grandfather who kept showing up. For now, at this particular moment in a still running story, that's enough.